Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our special Tuesday edition of the Energy Code Technical Advisory Group. Thank you so much for being here because we need to get through all the stuff between today and this Friday and have a robust discussion about all of it. So thank you so much. I will, as have done in the past, if there's more than one dissenting vote, I'm going to call for a roll call. That's a practice I'll just do. And there's really no other introductions. You probably have all been to a Energy Code tag meeting before. We're going to use raise hands. I'm going to call on people in the order in which I see their hands raised. We're going to take comments from public as well as the tag members. And so if you have any questions, just unmute and ask them. So Krista, let's do a roll call and fingers crossed we have a quorum.
Jill Anderson.
Present.
Damon Doyle.
Present.
Mike Fowler.
Good morning.
Mark Sniffen. Jeremy Moore. Wade Craig.
Here.
Mike Poirier. Dwayne Johnlin. Dave Balon.
Here.
Lisa Rosenau. Jonathan Jones. Megan Kramer.
Here.
David Reddy.
Here.
Gary Heikkinen.
Here.
Kevin Dwell. Andrea Smith.
Here.
Irina Rasputnis.
Here.
Chris Burrows.
Here.
Amy Wheelis.
Here.
Poppy Storm.
Here.
Greg Davenport.
Here.
Albert Rooks. Henry Odom.
Here.
Gavin Tennell.
Gavin can't make it. This is John Lang, his alternate.
I thought I saw him pop up in the registry for a minute. Patrick Hayes.
Here, but gone between 10 and noon. Doctor's appointment.
Luke Howard.
Here.
Liz Reichert.
Here.
Jason Carter. Jeanette McHugh.
Here.
And Jonathan Jones said he had some audio issues, but he is here.
Wayne is here.
Dwayne is here.
All right, appears we have a quorum. Is that correct, Krista?
We do.
Woohoo. All right, thank you so much for being here. We will get right into it. We have to review and approve the agenda. Does anybody, I guess, is there anybody from the public that wants to be recognized? Unmute and we'll try and not make it chaotic. Go ahead, Larry.
Larry Andrews from Andrews Mechanical. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Anybody else from the public?
Tim Atterbury, Associated General Contractors of Washington.
Welcome, Tim. Anybody else? Okay. We will now look at the agenda that you see in front of you. And is there anybody who wants to either modify something or make a motion to approve it as written? Just so you know, everything is on the agenda today. All the remaining proposals are on the agenda today. I do not expect we will get to every single one of them, but we will get through many of them.
And I did inadvertently add a proposal that was dismissed because it was incomplete, and I apologize. I've got it stricken here. So we will not be hearing that one.
Motion to approve.
Second that motion. This is Greg.
Thanks, Dwayne and Greg. We have a motion. We have a second. Is there further discussion on the agenda? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, we now have an agenda. We have minutes from May 27th.
This is Amy. I move to approve the minutes of May 27th.
Thanks, Amy. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes as written. We have a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, we have an agenda. We have minutes approved. We are on to the good stuff, the proposals. We're going to start with 065, Sean Denniston, heat pump space heater. This was tabled a while ago, and we are now going to consider it today. So Sean, you have the floor to talk about any revisions. And then I'll ask for anybody else who helped Sean, or even if they disagreed with him, to weigh in on the revisions, and then I'll open it up to everybody else. So Sean.
Thanks. And I was wondering if I could show 3 quick slides to help frame the discussion and maybe pre-answer some of the questions.
Sounds good to me.
All
Go
right.
ahead and share screen if you can.
All right. Well, there's no reason to put this in presentation mode unless you can't see it very well. So we wanted to establish first kind of the larger framework of why we're even doing this. It really is largely about energy efficiency for us. So this is the average modeled EUI of a single family dwelling from the report on modeling the energy state energy code from Ecotope. And what we can see is that the EUI, even on a code compliant gas home, is still substantially higher than the EUI on an electric heat pump home. And so these fundamental efficiency gains are one of the things that are holding the Washington code back. And we want to address that. We really want to lock in those efficiency gains. Affordability is one of the issues that has been brought up frequently. And we would like to expand that conversation of affordability, that affordability isn't just about the bulk cost of energy. Volatility of energy prices is also a key issue in energy affordability. So what we did is we actually pulled the average Washington state residential energy rates historically from the Energy Information Administration. And then we plotted percent changes year over year. And that's what this does. The percent change of the energy cost for natural gas and electricity. And what we see is that particularly in the last 10 years, well, actually the whole last 20 years, the volatility on natural gas, since it's an energy commodity, in a raw commodity, is far more volatile. So a homeowner who has a certain amount of energy budget, utility budget, if their energy rates are fairly reliable and fairly dependable, through conservation, they can actually have that level of affordability. They can make sure that their bills will be affordable. They might go through some deprivation to do that, and that is an unfortunate reality of inequity in our society, but at least that tool is available to them. But if their energy rates keep going up or down, then that tool of self-conservation becomes less useful. And so you can have these sudden surprises and changes in your energy bill that have nothing to do with your behavior. And so while, electricity is not a flat line, it is far less volatile than the natural gas prices over the last 20 years. This also shows us, especially if we look at the end of that, where that trend line for natural gas is going, is that current affordability in natural gas is no guarantee of future affordability. So I think that these are an important piece to bring to the affordability discussion. It's not just about bulk costs. And then we mentioned this, when this was first tabled, but there is the auxiliary benefit of, by having heat pump for space heating, means that you have cooling. And with the air quality issues that we have seen and the heat events that we've seen over the last couple of years in Washington, this is, while this is mid-rise, so it's not low-rise, but this is a multifamily development. This is in Vancouver, Washington. This is one of the days when the air quality was so bad that they said, do not go outside. And here are all these people with their windows open because it's too hot to not have them open. So having mechanical cooling is a real fringe benefit to this requirement. So that helps answer some of the questions and set us up for our discussion. So now I need to stop share. Thank you for letting me do that. And then we can go through the proposal itself. So thank you, Krista. So we made a few key edits. Even since last time, we've continued to have people engage us about some of the issues. And so in addition to the edits that we discussed last time about changing the thresholds for electric resistance, this also brings in the exceptions for electric resistance for multifamily that is in the commercial code that people found useful for there. So we brought that over and split. So we have that electric resistance allowance that was based on passive house levels of peak load capacity, limited that to R3, and then expand it to R2, bring over for R2 all the other ones. Of course, if the later proposal that moves all R2 over to commercial comes through, this will have to be reconciled, but we're trying to make that allowance. And I had a last minute discussion, and so I hope the tag would be amenable to an additional exception for any building sites where there is no electric utility service available. That was, it's not common, but it does happen. So we hope you would be willing to entertain an additional exception, because I just had this conversation yesterday evening. The point of these exceptions is we really want to lock in the market transformation that we've gotten from the fuel normalization table, not lose any ground, but we don't want to have these fringe circumstances to really force a building toward a system that just doesn't make sense for them. We're happy to answer any questions.
Hey, just so you know, Sean, about 30 seconds ago, David Reddy sent in a different possibility for item 1 there, exception 1.
Okay.
Yeah,
just I sent that to Krista to replace the group R3 dwelling or sleeping units with the language used in other sections, detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and multiple single family dwellings. So that would just replace the first part of exception 1. Exactly.
Thank you.
I would be fine with that if my opinion matters for anything in this.
Yeah, your opinion matters a great deal, as does everybody in the room. So, but yeah, we don't have R3 in the residential code, so or we don't have R3 in some codes. So I guess I'm going to open it up to anyone else who kind of was involved with Sean in crafting or recrafting this proposal. So Johnny, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a few. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. There's a couple other exceptions that were in a working draft. They're pretty minor, but I know that another member of the tag had requested that we remove the word unitary from number 2. So into heat pump equipment instead of into unitary heat pump equipment, which is, sorry, that is now number 3. But if you could remove the word unitary and then add the word radiant heat exchanger to number 5. So it would say waste heat, comma, radiant heat exchanger and energy recovery systems. And then add a, I guess would now be a 7th exception that would allow for biomass to be used in climate zone 5. I think if that tag member would like to speak more to what exactly that language might look like, that'd be great. But I just want to make sure that everybody who had any concerns was able to get their thoughts in. Also, I'm willing to present on the energy and cost data if that's requested by the tag. I don't want to waste time though, but happy to answer any questions or present on the data if needed.
Thanks, Johnny. So just to capture what you said for tag consideration, is that all captured on the screen right now?
There should be a 7th one. I'll type into the chat, but it has to do with biomass in Eastern Washington.
Okay, thanks, Johnny. Larry, I have you next.
Getting back to the proposals that he did. So you said code compliant. So when I see code compliant, was that 80% equipment or was that 90 or 95% equipment that was used on your proposal there that you flashed up at the beginning? And then also on your gas to electric comparison, I don't think that's a true table for Eastern Washington. We've had very steady gas rates for the past 20 years. And in fact, at times, they've been much more stable than the electric rates. And I don't know about the west side, but I know in the Avista territory, that's been true. So that graph that you showed there doesn't apply to Eastern Washington. But I would like to know what type of equipment did you use on that graph on your first page that you put up there? Was that 80%, 90%, 95%? And then what was it?
I believe, Larry, the graph was directly from the report to the legislature, or the report after the 2018 code passed. And that was prepared by Ecotope. So I guess Sean could answer that, or perhaps somebody from Ecotope could answer that question.
Yeah, this is Henry at Ecotope. It was a condensing gas furnace. So 92.
Okay.
And then for the utility data, the Energy Information Administration had average utility rates for the whole state. So that brings in as an average. That is the only actual historic data that I was able to find for Washington. We could do a similar exercise if we had historic data for other, for subregions in Washington, but this showed the average. And so I thought it was very illustrative.
Thanks, Sean. Larry, was that address your questions, or did you have more to say? And I can't hear you, Larry, if you're talking. You're on mute.
Sorry, when Johnny gets to his report, I'd like to go through that report that Johnny has on here. Okay,
I guess.
Thank
do we
you.
want Johnny to present the report? I guess you're asking Johnny to do that. So Johnny, do you want to take?
I can. I just want to make sure that if I'm happy to do that, if that's what the tag would like, and if that's, if that would satisfy folks. I just don't want to waste time. So is that something I should do, Chel?
Yeah, why don't you spend 3 or 4 minutes on it? I guess.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Directly to do that, and I'm guessing other people are interested as well. So if you want to share your screen, you can, or you can just.
Can you give me the ability to share my screen, Krista? Thank you. Okay, so basically I looked up the current 2021 integrated draft requirements for R401 through 405 and put them in here and listed the exact sources and like notes and like which table I got. So this is just the building characteristics of the building. And this is what I put into my baseline assumption. And I then had cost data that I had put into a table here. I listed where I got the material data cost, as well as where I got the labor cost, as well as the O&M cost, as well as the equipment lifetime. So I tried to be as transparent as possible on the assumptions. I put all of that into a program called BOPT, which I will not run, but I will show you. Basically, it just allows you to put in the different assumptions for the different wall types and for the different equipment types. So here, this is an example of an 80% AFUE, which would be the federal minimum. Sorry, it's a little loud here. I'm in a location like this is as quiet as I could go. And once I plotted the energy modeling results, this is what came out of BIOT basically for a bunch of different scenarios. I tried to capture every scenario that I was asked a question on. So, what about higher efficiency gas equipment? What about situations where there's no cooling? What about situations where they comply with the 406 table? I try to capture all of them for both Spokane as well as Seattle. And then I created formulas that were referenced into the actual life cycle assessment tool. So this fed all of the assumptions that I used on the lifetime of the equipment, the installed cost, the maintenance cost, as well as the energy consumption and energy use based off of the OFM input requirements. So all of that comes from the main spreadsheet, and it's all looked up through Excel formulas. And all of that fed back to these tables. So that was methodology. Here's the results. Basically, all of these green are the scenarios in which we have one of our proposals or both of our proposals pass, or even an all-electric proposal. And the further to the left it is, the least it costs upfront. The further down it is, the least it costs over its lifetime. So you want to be in this down left area, either for life cycle or upfront cost. As you can see, this grouping of green, the different heat pump water heating, heat pump space heating, all electric scenarios typically have lower life cycle cost or lower upfront cost, sometimes both, than scenarios in which we have all gas equipment that are high efficiency furnace, high efficiency heat pump. But
excuse me, Johnny, could you give us a little zoom in on that, because that's impossibly small on my screen.
Sorry about that. I have to scroll it out a little bit so that you can actually see what the thing is. But here's upfront cost, life cycle cost. This dot here that's red, this is actually what would be built if to code. This includes the R406 table. So you have to include options from the R406 table. And I used assumptions and input data from the 2018 NEA and Ecotope studies to put in both the energy efficiency improvements as well as those costs into my model. You can see that an R406 compliant electric building costs thousands of dollars cheaper than an R406 compliant building with gas that has cooling. It's also cheaper upfront than one that doesn't have cooling. That's mostly because the envelope upgrades required to pass the code. And the life cycle cost is higher for the all electric building compared to the one that doesn't have cooling. That's because you're not paying a cooling bill. So it's pretty hard for you to compete on life cycle cost if you're not paying a cooling bill. And that's for Spokane, and this is the results for Seattle. Similar story. So that's pretty much the gist of it. There is a need for cooling analysis I did that shows like if you have the options table versus just not including the options table, what is it going to look like? 500 of your 8760 hours is going to be above 90 degrees in Spokane, and 31 or is going to be above 90 in Seattle, 400 above 85. I'll stop for now. I know that was a lot of information, but I just wanted to be fair and present it. Thank you.
Thanks, Johnny. Todd chatted that he has a question for you. I'm assuming everybody else has probably some questions as well, but go ahead, Todd.
Just real quickly, Johnny, it's interesting analysis. In the life cycle cost tool from OFM, they have a tab for projected future utility costs. Did you use their hardwired numbers or did you update those?
I use their hardwired numbers that's required to be used for these cost proposals. I don't have a choice in that.
You did update the discount rate though to 5%. Is that correct?
The discount rate should be what was matched in the assumptions required, like the input required assumptions in the lifecycle cost tool. There's like a separate PDF which tells you what to put in. It does require you to update the OFM variables, which gives you this like weird kind of error. But that's what's required for you to do for yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Todd. Good question. And thanks, John, for the answer. We're going to go back to the order in which people raise their hands. Andrea, you are next.
Yeah, thank you. Just had a question. Have you contacted the UTC at all to see if they have forecasts available for electric and natural gas? I think that forecasts from our state agency would be more effective than utilizing historical data.
I did not. I just used what was in the lifecycle cost analysis tool that's built in. It's a protected workbook. I don't have the ability to change its assumptions. If UTC were to be agreeable to update that workbook, I'm more than happy to update my results. Or if somebody can unlock the workbook for me, I'm happy to present different results, but I don't have that ability.
Thanks, Andrea. Patrick, you are next.
Can we put the proposal back on the screen? So everybody can see it. There. As I said, when we were discussing this before regarding the watts per square foot, I think those are extremely too low. I do thousands and thousands of heat loss calculations every year and size heaters. I don't think a passive house is a good baseline at all. The 1.1 and 1.3 is, I don't even know, the smallest wall heater you can buy from King is 250 watts. So at 1.1, 100 square foot bedroom, you can't even buy a heater. It's small enough. So how would that work? Now, King and Cadet in Washington State supply most of the heaters, and they are manufactured locally. So a 10 by 10 or 10 by 11 bedroom that you wanted to have some electric resistance, smallest one you can put in there is 250 watts. So mathematically, how does that work? I'd like to make a friendly amendment that for R3, and that it's raised to 2 watts per square foot in 4, and in 5, actually, I think you could do it the same, just 2 watts per square foot in either zone.
I guess, Sean, do you see that as friendly?
Sean, I don't think a passive house is a good baseline. You know, that's not what we build. And second, Sean, I'm not exactly sure of your background, but you should have respect for mine. I mean, 55 permits, many 250, 300 unit apartments. I size all the heaters. I'm not trying to blow smoke up anybody's dress. These numbers are not real.
Thanks, Patrick.
By the
Sean, do you
heaters,
see that
Sean,
as,
also.
do you see that as friendly?
I would. We chose passive house as a good benchmark, and
It's
if
not a good benchmark.
as a
Patrick,
good bench,
please let Sean respond.
we saw it as a good benchmark to start with for what a low energy home looks like. If it needs to be just a little bit higher because of the way that equipment availability works out, particularly in smaller homes, and going from 1.1 or 1.3 to 2 is not going to allow a tremendous amount of electric resistance to suddenly be used in homes. I think that's a reasonable accommodation.
Okay.
I agree, Sean. It's not going to allow, I mean, a 250 watt heater is a very small amount of electric resistance heat.
Patrick, would you suggest any different numbers for Eastern Washington or rather climate zone 5?
I kind of thought about 2.5 shell, but you know, I'm trying to stay in the spirit of this proposal. And you know, you can go to 2.5, but I actually think 2 watts per square foot in Eastern Washington, unless they had a super cold spell, you know, I'm trying to get it. I would like to be accepted, but if people would be accepting to 2.5 watts per square foot for climate zone 5, I'm good with that.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. I have David Reddy next.
Yeah, I guess, Patrick, just so there is the exception 2 that's specific to the apartments case. I think that you mentioned you do the MOSKey load calcs for. So that,
Yeah,
I just want to make sure you.
Yeah, I recognize that. And I was looking at the R3 numbers as being really low. And I read through the exception 2 thing, which I don't have any comments on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this is fine. You know, the one situation is very small homes like Dadu's where you might be in that 500 square foot range. And we don't really have a square footage threshold in this current language. It's something that just occurred to me now but at 2 watts per square foot, you know, that's 1,000 watts for a 500 square foot Dadu. That's borderline. I guess that may be something we want to consider here is for very small buildings, some kind of.
Yeah, David, in R3, 1,000 watts, it's like you said, 5 square feet, 1,000 watts in an R3 home that has 4 cold walls. That's pretty skinny, you know.
Okay.
I know that.
Does someone want to work on some language that would be that exception?
Well, how about this, Shell? Since R3 is going to have, unless it's a townhome, it's going to have 4 cold walls. So if we were to assume that an R3 dwelling has 4 cold walls, and like David brought up the 500 square feet,
Yep.
you know, maybe that watt is just 500 times.
Okay.
I think the number is 3 watts per square foot. That would be a 1,500 watt heater in the 500 square foot home, which definitely could heat it, you know, considering the envelope of the home.
Okay. So under exception 1, it seems like you could suggest that in home we don't really need the Eastern Washington thing if people have no comments on it, but you could add after the end of zone 5 period, you could add for homes 500 square feet or less, 3 watts per square foot is acceptable or something.
Yeah.
Like that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you could do that.
Yep. Okay.
Yes, that would work.
Okay, and then the language have to be cleaned up, but I want to get to other people because right now this has been a conversation with a small number of people, and I want to make sure everybody gets a chance. So, Todd, did you still have a question, comment?
I don't have a question. I have some thoughts when that's appropriate.
Okay, please go ahead, Todd.
So thanks very much. So Todd Myers of the Washington Policy Center. I commented last week. I work on environmental and climate policy. And one of the things that I wanted to raise, since I'm sitting outside, as you can tell by the background noise and the beautiful sun, is the issue of the projections, which I asked Johnny about, and then the impact on climate. The first thing is that I mentioned last week, Washington State has a very rigorous climate policy that it has adopted with sharp targets. Those targets have to be met legally. So the question here about this policy is not whether it adds to CO2 reduction. It does not. The question is how we achieve that CO2 reduction and whether we should provide flexibility or mandates. And if we're going to provide mandates, we need to be certain that the data that we are using is accurate. I appreciate the research that Johnny has. It's very well sourced. I think people are always able to quibble about his sources and use their own sources and prices, but generally, I think it looks pretty good. The challenge I have is that the OFM model for the life cycle analysis that he is required to use has some flaws. The first is that the original proposal for this said that there were no impacts on affordable housing because it actually cost less to build to this standard. That is no longer true. In the updated version of costs and Johnny's analysis that he sent last week shows that upfront costs are higher using this standard than without it. So that's not surprising. I think that people have said that for a while, and now his analysis says it. What the OFM life cycle analysis and what he argues is that those additional costs are saved over time by reduction in utility costs. And that is based on the spreadsheet that I asked the question about in the OFM model. Johnny's right that is hardwired. It is based on a 2019 US Department of Commerce estimate of future costs for electricity and natural gas. There is an updated version of that though. There was a 2021 version. And what's interesting in the 2021 version is that those numbers flip. And if you enter those new data from the same source required by the OFM for 2021, rather than using the old 2019 numbers, the utility costs flip, and actually the new standard is more expensive in utility costs than the old standard. I will say all projections, especially projections of 50 years, are unreliable. But if we are going to use the life cycle analysis as a basis for determining whether this is a good model to impose, what the data show is that this new standard using the OFM's own tool is higher cost upfront and higher utility costs down the line. If you want to disregard those, that's fine, but disregard them at your own peril. You cannot simultaneously argue that this is a good policy based on that data and disregard it when it is not, when it doesn't sort of fit. So I just want to make that clear that when you use the most recent numbers in the OFM model, the data show that this actually increased cost both upfront and over the long term. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Todd. Yes, we're always in the struggle of we have to use a tool, and we know it's imperfect in many ways, and figuring out all those ways is difficult to do. Good comments. I have D. Scott Peterson was next. Looks like your hand is down now. So we'll go to Mike Fowler.
All right, thank you. I just want to, as I read exception 1, that is a total for the entire dwelling unit. So in, say, as it was originally 1.3 in climate zone 5, a home, 2,000 square foot home in Spokane would have a total of 2,600 watts of heating that it could use. throughout the entire place. So if in a 3-bedroom unit, each bedroom could get 500 watts and a living room could get 1100 watts. So I just want to point out that that was that is written as an entire place, not a per bedroom, as I think Patrick was saying when he was saying you couldn't heat a bedroom with a 250 watt heater. It's not on the room space; it's on the entire conditioned floor area of the home, and that's what I wanted to point out. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I have Dave Bail on next. Dave, I cannot hear you.
Yeah, you're right. Well, let's start out with OFM because that's a silly argument. The OFM model as we use it is a delta. It asks for what the incremental cost of the code changes we've got is over the previous code changes. The costs, however, are also deltas. So if you have an inflation, it's an inflation on both sides of the equation. And then the only question is, well, did you end up with a cost with a positive cost? And that's the only argument that the SBCC is interested in. And it's probably the only argument we should be interested in. So I think that it's, that we get the OFM because we needed a standardization. The SBCC selected that one. That's what we've got, and that's what we should be using. The second thing that I'm concerned about at this point is that in this proposal, we have what amounts to the same goals that we've had for some time in the Washington Code. And we would be asking to change it from a voluntary program in which we take, a shotgun to the builders and say either do this or pay $10,000. The other way to do it is say, just do this and pay nothing. We pay whatever you need to do. That's a bit different philosophy, although given the speed with which we should be trying to get this done, it's certainly a reasonable interpretation. That said, what this does is it essentially obviates for the most part, obviates the need for the normalization table, because we no longer are comparing an electric load to a gas load. The gas load has now been eliminated, at least as far as the heating systems are concerned. I don't actually know exactly how to do that. Well, I kind of know how to do it in the sense that we could take it out, but we'd have to start all over again with the options table without where you actually use our existing base, but make the changes based on how that base is changed without a gas furnace. I think that the question, Patrick's question, is probably right, but for the most part, we've got we don't get a big energy penalty for marginal changes in the size of these little heaters. It's true that if there's not enough heat, that you'll get reduced energy because in fact it's not making the set point. But for the most part, that's a rare event. Even with these smaller units, most of the time that's only on peak. So the only reason you do a larger amount of heating is because you think the on peak load is noticeably higher. And for the 2 or 3 or 4 hours a year in which that's the relevant temperature, well, that's a bad thing, but that's only 2 or 3 or 4 hours. Anyway, so those are my initial comments. I would like the proponent to actually wax poetic on how or if the normalization would be changed or removed under this proposal.
So I think Sean could answer that. It's possible Henry could also answer that as well.
Sure. So because we have that a gas heat pump is still allowed under this, I think you could say that the fuel normalization is still necessary. If we include my suggested exception for sites where electric utility is not available, then it's still very relevant, because we're talking about, standard gas equipment could be operating in those homes, and we would need everything that's currently in there, because that becomes a wholesale exception from heat pumps altogether. So I don't think, because we still have some fringe cases, I don't think we're to the point yet where we eliminate the fuel normalization or the R406 tables. But that's
Okay.
just because of the exceptions.
So,
Okay, that makes sense.
but in the normalization table, these points associated with it are associated with essentially a fuel mix baseline. If the fuel mix baseline doesn't have gas in it, or it has gas in it, but it's a rare thing. Like, for example, we can't get electricity, but somehow we get pipeline gas. To say that would be a rare case is greatly overstating the situation. Anyway, the next, so you would actually, even if you ended up with a fuel normalization table, you would have to rebalance that table to take the gas furnace, which is now even in the current model a fairly significant value. You would have to take it out in some way that made it so that it rebalanced it. And right off, I mean, I think it can be done, but I've not actually tried to do it. So,
okay.
And then once you do the rebalance, then the question is, well, what do you use as basis in the option table, which I think already does mostly that, but it would have to be reconsidered for certain equipment.
Okay.
So if I could respond to that, as I look at the fuel normalization table, it doesn't say natural gas, it says combustion. So that would capture propane, which is, I think, what you would see in some of those off-grid locations, and at least in my reading.
Yeah, that's probably right.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Do you have anything more?
Probably, but I'm done for now.
Okay, Wade, you're up.
Yeah, just a couple comments on the percentage of change graph. Statistics are wonderful, and you can make them say, for example, especially for graphs. When you take a fuel like electricity that's 2.5 times the cost per BTU of natural gas, the rate of change is magnified 2.5 times. So the volatility of gas looks dramatically worse because it's at a much lower cost. And looking at that graph, I believe there was like 9 times that the cost of gas was lower than the cost of the electricity change, which to me would lead towards, wouldn't diversity of energy options be the source there? Now, I guess I'm a little confused right now with all the changes to this proposal as to whether or not you can have natural gas as a backup, but I know that we're headed away from having fossil fuel in the home. So if that's the case, then we're also using heat events as one of the reasons that we need to have cooling in the houses. We also have no power events. And now you've got no heat, no hot water, no cooking. And that will magnify the no power events, just like and we probably have as many of those as we have heat events. So, using those graphs and that rationale to try and support this proposal, I think is a bit deceptive. That's all.
Thanks, Wade.
Chair, can I respond to that?
Sure, briefly.
Briefly. So keep in mind that that is a graph of percent change. So the cost of the utility does not matter. It is all about the percentage of the change from year to year. And the units basically get canceled out because you're only comparing electricity against electricity. You're only comparing gas against gas for that percent change. In terms of gas backup, we still have the supplementary heat requirement in place. Gas would be allowed as a backup if people chose this, in the way that this is phrased. So if that becomes that important, then someone could certainly have a gas backup system.
Yeah, on the percentage of change point, when you've got a fuel that's twice as expensive, its percentage of change is going to be different also by a factor of 2.
Thanks, Wade and Sean. Henry, you are up next.
Yeah, thanks. So I have a couple comments. I think the first one that's most straightforward is there's an existing section, R403.7.1, which requires ductless mini split heat pump in the largest dwelling of any detached 1-2 family dwellings and townhouses that are primarily heated by electric resistance. And that exception is a total capacity of 2 kilowatts or less. And so that would kind of send this exception 1 into a circular reference to some existing code language. So that's something that we should sort out here because those are putting 2 different limits.
Do you have a resolution for that, Henry, or?
The proposal included striking that section as part of this change.
Oh, it did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this would replace it. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Second one that kind of came out during our R406 discussion was this definition of what a primary space heating system is. And I don't know if that was ever fully defined. That was kind of left open-ended after our discussion. And I imagine this same topic would really readily apply here. And if we can find a good solution to that, and this is kind of ad-libbing a little bit, if you give a primary space heating requirement to be heat pump, then we would get that COP on the heating as a primary source, and especially east of the Cascades, we've heard a lot of comments about brownouts and electricity goes out, and someone brought up, I think it was either commercial or this tag, that a lot of generators can power 120 volt furnace. You don't usually get 208 volt generators, and I thought that was a pretty intriguing argument. So if we did go with the primary secondary setup, that could open up the door a little bit more for this proposal to have a little more robust and kind of backup and heating systems. And that also kind of goes along the lines of, if you're putting AC in, you should make it a heat pump. I know that's going on at federal scale as well. So that's not really a definite response to this, but it's a point that I'd like to bring up. And then finally, back to the OFM and the cost benefit analysis. Sorry, it's a little loud. There's a lot of different inputs, costs, fuel escalation rates, all sorts of stuff. And they can all lead to different results. And I'd just like to say that, especially with the heat pump water heating proposal that I went through and those R406 updates, I think just like to let everyone know that we've hit our energy saving targets, and we've shown that through a different way. So this would definitely be kind of the cherry on top to get to that point. But and Mike Kennedy mentioned earlier, we've definitely hit our savings targets for this goal. So I just want to bring that up for everybody here on the tag. Thanks.
Henry, when you say primary, do you mean primary versus supplementary, or largest space versus smaller spaces?
Primary versus supplementary. And that was one of the big items we brought in R406 was this dual fuel heat pump setup, which I hear is happening a lot. And especially if this doesn't define a primary or secondary, I think you could still see kind of a loophole through this code section, which could be good or bad, or might not be exactly what Sean's going for. Just something I thought I'd bring up.
Did you have suggested wording? Sorry to interrupt, but Was there a specific spot where you could put in a phrase to deal with what you're talking about?
Yeah, I could look into that. I think it's still kind of up in the air for the R406 as well. And I will have to revisit that. Not necessarily the language, but as Dave mentioned, the whole equalization table or normalization table and the credits and all that with the heat pump space or heat pump water heating proposal I went through. That's a pretty easy update to R406, but if this were to pass, it would be a pretty major change to that section. So I'm mainly focused on that one, and I hope to get something to share at the tag on Friday just to highlight how that change might happen. As I mentioned, I have a good idea for the water heating, but this one would be a pretty monumental change.
Thanks, Henry. If you could, or somebody could come up with language that describes your concern or your suggestion, that would be great. And if they could do so in the next 15 or 20 minutes, that would be very, very good. I'm going to call on people that I haven't called on yet, just to make sure we hear from everybody. So Gary, you are next.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. So I guess I had a couple of questions initially, and I don't know if this question is for Johnny or Sean, but I'm looking at the life cycle cost analysis and the large spreadsheet there that you had up before, comparing all of the different options. And one of the questions I had specifically was on this first construction costs and whether or not that first construction cost for gas includes the first cost of the gas service line coming into the home or building from the gas main. Is that included in there?
It includes assumptions for both the cost of the gas infrastructure as well as what the current line allowances are. So,
and what is that total?
I'm pulling it up right now. Sorry, give me 1 second. The cost is $2,637 for a gas connection cost and $1,932 for an extension allowance. So basically it's $700 to install a gas line. This is a lot more conservative than was done before. I've kind of, heard concerns on the initial analysis that those rates were, folks, wanted me to look into those rates further. So I used the exact UTC rates that for both Eastern and Western Washington based off of, I think it was in October or November, Avista and Puget Sound Energy had put forward new UTC allowances. And then the average cost of the gas connection was about 9 different estimates that were averaged together. So I think this is probably overly conservative, to be honest, but here we are.
I would then maybe ask a quick question. I don't know if Chris Burrows, are you on the line? Maybe he's not. We'll skip.
Yeah,
there.
no, I'm here. Sorry.
Well,
no, sorry, Gary, I'm here. I was unmuted.
Yeah. If a home installs gas equipment, do they pay anything for the connection if there's a main in the street?
Yeah, so if there's a main in the street and you're just adding a new connection and you have gas appliances, then no. It's a much more complicated, equation from that, and depends on how far they have to go and all of that. But if you're on a main, then no.
Okay, so my point there is that in many cases there will be no cost to a homeowner if there's a main in the street, if they're including gas equipment, and those first costs do not apply. I also take a look at, for example, the present value of maintenance costs. I just happened to take a look at the difference between the gas with all high efficiency equipment compared to the all electric federal equipment. And it shows, almost a $3,000 higher maintenance cost for the gas equipment as compared to the all electric federal equipment. And I guess I would just challenge that without getting into a debate. Todd already brought up the issue of utility costs and which particular projection you use. All that to say this, the relative, I guess, advantages or disadvantages in the cost effective analysis could pretty much say that it's a wash in all of this, depending upon what you assume, and really need to get back to the basics here, that what this proposal is doing is it's eliminating an energy choice for a lot of people and a lot of homes with really no cost benefit at all. And I will say it again, the state of Washington can get to its 70% goals without eliminating natural gas equipment and appliances. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm opposed to this proposal and will be voting against it.
Thanks, Gary. I thought I saw Corey Wilker's hand up, but not seeing it now. Go ahead, Corey.
Sorry, I ended up clicking it off of there. I just had a couple questions. There's one back to the graph. For me, some of these inputs can be suggestive. And so when we're talking about percentage change, I'm wondering if the person that made the graph could make it based on a dollar value, because then we have an even baseline. I have a feeling that our red line of natural gas wouldn't have bumped the blue line of electrical. In the forecast, we're already getting 30% of our electricity from Canada, and the forecast is for that to increase. So as a commodity, I think we're going to be looking at higher electric costs. The other question I had was with the electricity that we're going to need now for heat pumps. Have we factored in the larger service if we have to go from a 200 amp to a 400 amp for a house? Is that part of the projections on those sheets?
It is assumed it'll be a 200 amp house. This is a 2,400 square foot house, and relatively, compared to the rest of the United States, relatively mild climate, especially if you're having gas backup allowed for supplemental heating. It's fairly unlikely you'd have to be required to have a 400 amp panel.
Okay, well, the heat pumps and those take a significant amount of power. If you've got any other items in your house, well, anyway, and I was just curious if it was factored on a 200 amp or a 400 amp service.
200 amp.
I would just like to, I retrofit my entire house, built in 1950 with all electric appliances, heat pump space, heat pump water, electric cooking, and it's easily on a 200 amp panel, just as a personal anecdote.
Thanks, Henry.
2,000 square foot house.
Thanks, Corey. Is that okay? Cool. Thanks. Next I have Damon.
Thank you, Chairman. Heat pumps are great. I've been using them since 1993. I was a ductless dealer for several years. Once inverter technologies came around, the efficiencies are undeniable. And in a previous testimony in the previous meeting, we noted that the code has done a great job incentivizing the use of heat pumps. I think somebody quoted that Washington State was 80 to 90% gas heating, and it's dropped now down to 20, 30%. I don't know those numbers are perfectly accurate, but it was somewhere in those vicinities. That said, we can't simply eliminate gas as an option overnight. As mentioned last meeting, the grid is not capable in many areas, particularly the rural ones, to handle the added capacity. Yesterday, the IRC tag passed a recommendation to add a 40 amp charging circuit to all new construction. So there's an additional 40 amps out of that 200 amp panel. It was also noted that heat pumps with an HSPF of 9.5 or greater make up less than 14% of all systems that are currently manufactured. And the material shortages we're experiencing right now are expected to run for the next 18 to 24 months. We simply can't get matching indoor outdoor units in our industry right now. Passing this recommendation would have a negative impact on home buyers Not to mention that we need to extensively revise R406, and we're trying to get this done by the end of the week. So I think I would speak against this recommendation.
Thanks, Damon. Everybody has spoken at least once now, so please lower your hands if you have nothing further to say. We've spent a little over about an hour on this so far, so I want to hear from people, briefly on this issue. And then Krista, could you share the proposal? And then if anybody has more suggestions for language, I think that would be probably good to consider as well. So people I still have with hands up are Larry, Andrea, and Gary. So Larry, go ahead.
Joe, Krista had some internet issues, so she lost internet, and I just joined. Which proposal do you want me to show?
Oh boy, because she had made some markups, I think probably on her computer for this proposal, which is 065. But I think we would need to see the markups that she made on her computer.
But are those the same markups that the proponents made? Can one of the proponents show what's going on?
I think there were multiple markups.
Yeah, additional ones were made live, so we don't have a document that has all of them except for hers.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to suggest that we move on to the next proposal, and we'll revisit this as soon as Krista's back online. I think it would be challenging to vote on something which we don't have live in front of us, especially when it's got some.
Just a second.
Tag.
Let me show you what I have, and if it's not the same, then you can move. Give me a second.
So this is 065, and
that is not the updated version.
yeah, that's not the updated version. So I think just in the interest of time, until Krista gets a hotspot or gets back here, we should move on to the next proposal. I guess I don't see any other option. So
I'd sure like to finish up where I started with Johnny. I haven't had a chance, and I think it is important. And since I spent most of the weekend looking at Johnny's proposal, like we were supposed to, okay.
I appreciate that, and I guess what I was suggesting is we come back to it in half an hour. Would that be okay, Larry?
Sure, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting we vote on it. That would be, I think.
I just I asked Johnny to bring it up, and then I was nice to let other people come in, but I would like to address what Johnny brought up. Okay.
I guess in the interest, I guess, Johnny, if you're willing to bring that up again and answer questions, then Larry, go for it. I think we can continue on this one as long as we have.
Okay. I took a lot of time with Johnny's proposal, and I can see that he has spent a lot of time on it. And I want to thank Johnny for that. But what I see here, and to me, it's more than blunt, is the amount of labor that the man has put in for the piece of equipment. In our normal labor rates here, and it's at least equal to the equipment that you're putting in. And if you're going down the labor rates here, you're seeing that the labor is significantly less than what the equipment cost is. And that isn't even in the ballpark. Okay. And then when you go to look at his lifestyle area, and I want you to think about this. And here's the reason one of the reasons why I'm so adamant for what we're doing here, okay, is the lifetime cost of this stuff and the actual runtime, okay? So when we put a gas furnace in over here, and then we put an air conditioner over here, we get the gas furnaces, they last about 30 years over here, okay? And then when we put the air conditioner in, it lasts almost 30 years. Now I want to relate that to actual runtime. Okay. So we may cool out here for 2 months out of the year. So that air conditioner's only running for 2 months. Okay. And that's why we get 30 years out of an air conditioner over here. Okay, now you put a heat pump in that system, that heat pump is running 12 months out of the year. And in actuality over here, we're seeing heat pumps last 12 to 15 years that have to actually run. Okay, and many times, so that means we're going to have at least 3 changes of heat pumps in 50 years, probably 4. Okay. And that is not addressed here. And as a consumer and as me as a contractor, when I look at someone in the face and I say, is it going to pay? Because you got to remember that the gas is 2.5 times more BTUs than the electric. So as the heat pump is using, even if you have a 3 COP heat pump, it's when you start looking at the costs of repair and replacement, I can't honestly look at that customer and tell him that that's going to even come close to what it's going to be in the gas cost, because the gas cost is going to be significantly less over that 50 years, much less. Because you got to remember, every time you go back there to work on that unit or replace it, it's at least double the cost of what you put it in the last time for. Okay.
I can address some of those, Larry. So sorry, Larry, let me just address some of it. So I used life cycle equipment lifetimes based off of data from the EIA that was put out.
But those aren't realistic. Those aren't realistic, Johnny. You know,
I don't have to tell you that, like, I had to
please let
make
Johnny
assumptions.
respond, okay?
Yeah, I had to make assumptions, and I try to make assumptions that, you know, it says that furnaces last, 22 years and heat pumps last 18 years or air conditioners last 18 years.
So, but I mean,
but I source the data. If you have a different, if you have a different kind of more objective source, I'm more than happy to rerun the analysis. But
just take a look at it, Johnny. You got to have a piece of equipment that runs 12 months out of the year. And you got to have a piece of equipment that only runs 2 months out of the year. Okay.
Yeah, but an air conditioner runs,
No, they only run 2 months over here at best, because if you look at your data, the hours that you showed back in your data, it shows that the runtime isn't there.
So
okay.
the air source heat pump has a lifetime of 15.5 years. That's probably because of what you're stating, and the fact that it has to run both during the heating and cooling season.
Right.
Just an air conditioner, which has an 18-year lifetime. And this is based off of the median.
But that isn't even close. If you look at the runtime, the hours ran, Johnny. There is no comparison. And that's why it lasts so long. Okay. It's just common sense. If you can't understand that, I mean,
Larry, come on. This is
no, come on, Dave. I'm tired of you butting in. But that's
but
true.
Larry,
this is true. Okay, these are facts. And
they're not facts. They're things you're making up out of your head.
Point of order.
Okay, Dave, you do not have the floor. Larry, you have the floor, but you also need to be respectful of other people. Okay.
Right. I
and
tried
Larry,
to be,
I guess just we need data sources. We can't just go by experience. I think your experience helps, but I think
look at the runtime. Look at the runtime. Any mechanical machine has a life, and if you're running at hours 10 times longer almost, or 1.5 times longer, its life is going to be 1.5 times shorter. That's pure logic. Okay. And if you go to the people that build the equipment, they will tell you this stuff. They tell us this stuff.
Okay. Well, we need data sources that are widely spread. So if you,
I will get them I will try and get them by next Friday. It might be the week after.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you,
well,
Larry.
so we're probably going to, you know, vote on this in the next today or next Friday, and then it will go out for public comment. And so what we're finishing up by this Friday is not the final code. It has a long process to go after this. So so your data in a couple weeks will be essential to helping the council and additional public comment, because the MBE and the council and the public will get to weigh in many more times on this code. So having data in a couple weeks, I think is good. All right.
And just sorry, one more thing. Just like, you know, I'm more than willing to like run scenarios for folks. If you email me, I can run a scenario on other assumptions. I try to create this tool to be very versatile so that I can update assumptions as we go.
Okay. Thank you, Johnny. All right. We haven't heard from Peter. So Peter, you have the floor.
Hi, yeah, you know, living in the Tri-Cities, I would like to make the point that Spokane does not represent the entire Eastern Washington area. I operate my heat pump in cooling mode approximately 4.5 months out of the year. I'll start operating it here in the next week or so when it reaches 85 degrees here, and I'll probably run it more or less on and off through September or mid-September. The other point is that my heat pump, from personal experience, and I really dislike giving anecdotal evidence like this, but my last heat pump lasted 35 years running at that rate. And I had to put a new one in about 5-6 months ago, or 5-6 years ago. So I think really that it's appropriate to rely on the tables that I have seen, which says that a heat pump basically lasts 15 years and a gas heater lasts 18 years, if I'm correctly quoting the figures that I have been able to read on tables. And those probably reflect actual usage rather than the anecdotal usages. So I think we should be using those kind of figures in our calculations and not what everybody else thinks their particular location should be.
Thank you, Peter. Greg Davenport, I don't believe we've heard from you, so please go for it.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to make a friendly proposal to the proponent here that on this electric resistance question, the language is 1.5 watts per square foot as an exception, or 500 watts, whichever is greater, which will help accommodate the small buildings.
Okay, so that would be basically for exception 1. Would that be for exception 1, or is that just?
Yes.
So it'd be 1.5 watts per square foot, regardless of climate zone, and and what was the number?
Or 500 watts, whichever is greater. And that'll help accommodate the small houses.
500 watts. So right now we had said 3 watts per square foot for under 500, which would be a total of 1,500 watts for a 500 square foot house.
The current exception under the code is 0.5 watt per square foot. So this is 3 times what we already allow.
Okay, Sean, I guess, what do you think of this? What does the tag think of that change?
I am fine either way, so I'm willing to defer to the tag on what is the right number on that.
Okay, so
Cal, there was a good point made that in small homes, you may not get enough wattage, which is why I think or 500, whichever is greater, is a good solution here. Because I agree, sometimes there are good uses for electric resistance, but we have to keep it reasonable and not take away from heat pumps.
For homes 500 square feet or less.
No, or 500 watts of electric resistance, whichever.
Okay, so it has nothing to do with house size. You just say you get 500 watts or, okay, I get it.
Yep.
For homes.
That covers the small homes, so they can have 500 watts of electric resistance for 1 or 2 little rooms and still use a heat pump in the main room.
Okay. Okay, I guess I want to see if this is a good change or a change that others are kind of generally against. So I guess we'll hear on that as people speak. So I see, thank you, Greg. Next I have Andrea on the list.
Perfect, thank you. Just wanted to say a few thoughts. So as an association, we are opposed to this proposal. Probably not surprising. There's a current heat pump supply issue. It's hard to get now, and with California having their heat pump mandate coming up, it's going to be even more harder for us to get these units. Aside from that, we have a shortage of 268,000 housing units, and any additional costs added on to housing, such as this, would then price out more people. So for example, if you add on $1,000 to the cost of a home or apartment unit, about 2,200 people are excluded because they can no longer afford to rent or purchase that unit. So that means that based on the LCCA that was provided by Johnny, so thank you for doing that, but that means that a fully electric home would price out 22,000 people in our state. We have a housing and homeless crisis right now, and it's great that heat pumps allow for cooling, but it's not so great if you can't afford to shelter yourself in the first place. Anything that makes housing more more expensive doesn't make it more affordable, and if the tag and further down the line the SBCC at final adoption passes this proposal, it's going to be a sad day for housing affordability for our state. I would just urge a no vote from TAG members. We can't see this go through the entire process. This just signals to Washingtonians and our neighbors and our loved ones that lowering greenhouse gas emissions is more important than their right to be sheltered. So I would urge a no vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. We have Dwayne, you had your hand up. I see it down. Did you have additional words of wisdom?
Well, I did want to just check in with that statement that gas heaters last for 30 years. That, I believe, does not apply to the new 92 and 95% efficient equipment because it's condensing in it. The reports all are that those are much shorter lived. So if we're going to be talking about using high efficiency equipment, then the lifespan is likely not going to be the 30 years we had with the old fashioned stuff. Thanks.
Could I comment on that just a little bit? Dwayne, you were correct about that when that 90% equipment first come out. But now with the equipment that we have out with the 400 series stainless steel and the 300 stainless steel that's out in these equipments now, we're not seeing heat exchanger failures like we used to. Okay. In fact, the 400 series stainless that's out there is nearly bulletproof for what's coming down the tube at them. And that has been that's been the problem in the past. The industry has seen that happen and has made major changes. The new equipment that I'm seeing coming out now is going to last that long easily. You're not going to take a heat exchanger out anymore. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. I have Sean, you are up next.
So this might be more of a question for Andrea, because I've looked at the information that your organization has put out about housing affordability, and it's all based on median income, and then shows also then the home prices. And it looks like from your data, all the people who would be priced out by an increase of $1,000, however many, have already been priced out. So it seems that they've already been priced out just by the cost of land increasing and the home values in general increasing. And so that number of 22,000, I think that you stated, doesn't seem to be additionality above what are already priced out just by the overall housing crisis. So I'm curious if you have normalized those numbers based on instead of just looking at housing costs in general, but now that we look at the people who can afford homes at their current rates that are priced out by an additional 1,000. So the ones who can afford unaffordable housing as it is, because I think that that's a really important distinction, that most of our housing crisis is accounted, is being driven by so many other factors than just what there might be from a single proposal.
Yeah, so to answer your question, the report that I think you may be referencing was done by NAHB, but we had done one internally. And that report shows that 85% of Washingtonians cannot afford the median priced existing and new home that was currently available when we ran the numbers back in April. And so that's 85% of people that are unable to afford the home. So with that, we did use the median income, but we calculated the affordability based on the lowest threshold loan that you could qualify for. So using a mortgage calculator from one of our mortgage lenders, we were able to find out what the median home sales prices were in each county, and then as well as the state, and then figure out with the census data income distribution tables how many people could actually afford that based on the income of Washingtonians and how the income is distributed. And then we were able to figure out, and I don't have the exact numbers because I'm not in our office right now, but we boiled that down to the thousands of people. So rather than just a percentage. And from what that shows us is, like I said, 85% of Washingtonians can't afford to purchase a home. And they, sorry, somebody just walked by trying to talk to me. So they can't afford to purchase the home. And then every additional increase of $1,000 on top of the price that we ran the numbers for based on the median home sales price, every additional $1,000 then prices out an additional 2,200 people from the ability to purchase. And we utilize the FHA loan because, like I said, it's the lowest threshold for entry into home ownership. And that's based on a 30-year mortgage at whatever the average interest rate was back in April. And I'm trying to think if I'm missing anything here. Yeah, so, I mean, we took all of that into account. And like I said, there are a lot of variables at play when it comes to housing construction. However, every $1,000 adds up. And unfortunately, the way that, our society works, when you're a business, you're passing that cost on to your consumer, and the home buyers are going to be the ones that are going to be disproportionately affected by this. And aside from that, our home ownership rate in the state is the lowest among the traditionally disadvantaged populations. And so this proposal, in addition to all the other variables that increase the cost of housing, is going to disproportionately affect people from our Latino communities, our Black communities, people that traditionally are lower income. So there's more factors at play. And I think this is why a lot of people were hoping that this sort of proposal or decision on something so big could have been done through the legislature where there was more public input. Because I think a lot of people are going to be surprised if this passes, and there less supply for that heat pump, and that just then again raises the prices. So there's a lot of things to consider. Proposal idea, of course, and climate change is something that we really need to tackle, but we need to tackle it on a very focused front with all agencies and all legislators and counselors of this council present.
Okay,
Thank you, Andrea. We have spent an hour and a half on this now. I want everybody to try and keep their comments to be brief and add new information to the topic. I guess, Andrea, every time someone brings up that study, I have serious reservations about the drawing conclusions from it. And the main reason is because if someone is priced out of a median home, they can still buy a home. It's mathematically, you can do the math on a median home, but I don't know that that has a functional.
Yeah,
someone
and
could
so
be
this,
priced out of the lowest cost home. That's something where someone can be priced out, but for a median home, it just doesn't seem like someone would buy a home that, you know, costs a tiny bit less than that, and they're not priced out of it. So that, I guess that's just a challenge I have when considering that study. And then also when you look at the cost of land and especially the zoning code, those drastically increase costs, which is what we've seen. And I've done a lot of math on that. And comparatively, the energy code is small in terms of the increased first cost. And then also that many people lose their homes over utility costs. And so that's kind of just another fact to bring to bear when we're talking about costs and keeping people in homes. So
yeah, so if I could respond to that,
go ahead.
the median home price was used, but yes, we could go down to something a little bit more affordable. However, if you look even at just Zillow and you try to pull like homes for sale under 300,000, which is something that a lot of low income people could probably afford, there's nothing on the market in Washington. So it would be hard unless it was a structure. And of course it depends on the county. And I was looking at Thurston County at the time, and I've looked at Clark County because that's where I'm originally from. There's nothing available under 300,000. And if it is, it's ill maintained, meaning you're gonna have to put a lot of money for renovations to make it either habitable or you know, increase the energy efficiency of the building. And so that brings up another question to where there's just a lot of variables at play. And I just think that passing this proposal and adding even more cost is just going to be really horrible for our crisis. And as well, I wanted to also state that actually, no, just never mind.
Okay. All right, thank you, Andrea. I'm going to limit everybody to 1 minute. We have heard lots of testimony. Please add only new things to what has been said. I have Gary up next.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it. And actually, I was going to make a motion to amend by adding an exception. And specifically, that exception would read gas space heating systems with an efficiency.
Just a second, Krista, we lost something. We just see a fish on a table.
Yeah, my document crashed. Hang on, let me find it.
Okay, no worries. Sorry, Gary.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay, why don't you state your motion, and then
Okay.
we can think about that while Krista's Word document.
So my motion is to add an exception, to amend this proposal by adding an exception that specifically states gas space heating systems with an efficiency not less than 0.90 AFUE.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Is there a second for the motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Is there discussion on this motion? And please state your case very quickly.
That should say 0.90 AFUE. I'm trying to read it.
Okay, Gary, do you have anything more to say in support of your motion?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, all right. I'm assuming everybody with their hands up has something to say about this particular motion. Go ahead. Okay,
Was there a second on the motion?
there
Yes.
was.
Damon Doyle, I seconded.
Thank you, Damon.
Okay, all right. So I guess Andrea, go ahead to speak about this particular motion.
Sorry, I didn't lower my hand.
Okay, Larry.
I think this is a reasonable idea, and here's why. I mean, a lot of us over in Eastern Washington don't have air conditioners. This would give them reliable heat in most conditions without having to have a huge generator to power it. And at 90%, we're making a 10% savings from where we were. And we've already exceeded where we wanted to be. And this is even going to put us beyond that. And I would think this would be a great addition. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Carolyn, go ahead.
Hi, well, I actually was going to talk more generally about the
Okay.
proposal. So,
Okay,
but definitely we would support this as well. So,
Okay, I'll get back to you on the general thing. Dwayne.
Yeah, we've been already hearing, I think, today that equipment that's better than 90% is quite standard now. So this would create an exception that doesn't advance things in the real world. And 90% gas is not an equivalent to 250% heat pump.
Thanks, Dwayne. Sean.
So I think an exception like this would fairly well undermine the fundamental intent of this proposal. I think it would also render this proposal so that it doesn't do anything that's not already happening through R406. So I think if this is what people really want, then it may sound strange as the proponent, then just vote against this proposal, because adding this exception just eliminates what this proposal actually does and adds and harms the usability of the code. And then I think the last thing is I would have serious concerns about preemption by having it this way, because it would mean that there is no code minimum gas equipment path through the code, that it's effectively requiring above code gas. And as we have looked at the preemption issues, there is a very definite difference between eliminating all, requiring a certain technology and allowing different technologies where one is higher than the other. So I think if you really want to absolutely keep gas in the code, then just combustion equipment in the code, then just keep it in through R406. This exception, I think, just makes things for the worse for the code usability. Thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Henry, I saw your hand up. You lowered it.
Oh, I just lost internet for a second, but exactly what Sean said, as written, this doesn't add anything to the code. R406 does all.
All right, well, let's vote on this then. This is going to be a roll call vote. The motion is to add exception 9 for gas space heating system with an efficiency of 0.9 AFUE. So go ahead, Krista.
Damon Doyle,
Aye.
Mike Fowler,
No.
Mark Sniffen, Wade Craig,
Aye.
Dwayne Johnlin,
No.
Dave Balon,
Oh.
Jonathan Jones,
No.
David Reddy,
No.
Gary Hickinen,
Yes.
Andrea Smith,
Yes.
Irina Rasputnis,
No.
Amy Wheelis,
No.
Greg Davenport,
No.
Henry Odom,
No.
John Lang,
No.
Patrick Hayes, Luke Howard,
No.
Jason Carter, Jeanette McHugh,
Yes.
motion fails 5-11.
Okay. We are back to the, well, we don't have a main motion to pass this or to do something else with it. So we're going to go back to the main list of people to provide 1 minute or less of further new points to this. So I have Carolyn, go ahead.
Thanks. So on behalf of the Washington air conditioning contractors and HVAC, we're really concerned about this. First of all, because it effectively provides that heat pump mandate with the exceptions, the problem is if you try it, do it that way, there are so many alternatives and so many situations that can arise that you cannot predict in the future, particularly when we're looking right now at the supply chain. We don't know how long this problem is going to last. We've got California coming in. Right now, AHRI says they ship 300,000 heat pumps to California, and they're saying that manufacturing will have to double just to meet California's goals starting January 24 of every new home having either a heat pump, HVAC system, or heat pump hot water system. So we're really concerned about this because what this does is it takes away a lot of flexibility, and we think that flexibility needs to still be in the code to make sure that we can meet some of the emissions and energy efficiency goals with the most available equipment possible to the homeowner, to the builder, and to the HVAC contractors to make sure they're doing things right. There's so many varieties and variables that can come into play in here that to mandate specific types of equipment we think is the wrong direction. So we hope that you will oppose this. We think the code should be more focused and this tag should be more focused on, the most energy efficient equipment possible, regardless of how it's actually driven, whether it's a heat pump, et cetera. And that needs to be the focus. That was the nice thing about the tables and the options, because it left that flexibility in place for situations like what we're dealing with right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Greg.
Thanks, Chell. I'd like to make a motion to pass this proposal with 1.5 watts per square foot or 500 watts, whichever is greater, under exception 1.
Okay, that's basically, I understand the motion as to pass this proposal as modified, which includes all the additional language on the screen that we have modified today, including the 1.5 watts and the 500 watts option.
Correct. Let's vote.
Okay, so that would, I would replace, just a second, I just want to make sure that everybody's, including myself, are clear on the motion. So that would be exception 1, and then we would delete, yes, that, because that's, so the new exception 1 would start with detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and include the 1.5 watts and the 500 maximum. Okay, that is the motion on the floor. Is there a second?
This is Amy. I will second.
This is Luke. I just want to bring attention to, I think Greg said 500 watts, whichever is greater. It's written on the screen is whichever is less.
That's
Yes.
correct, Luke. Whichever is greater. It allows the small homes to have at least 500 watts.
Okay, that is the That's the motion as I understand as well. That's the intent of the motion at least.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Luke. Okay, so hands still up. Andrea?
Sorry, there's a motion in play right now.
The motion is to pass this as modified with the 1.5 watts of electric resistance or 500, whichever is greater. That's the motion, and we have a second for that.
Okay, I have nothing further to say.
Okay. Amy?
Oh, sorry, I meant to lower my hand.
Okay. Larry?
I would ask, did you pass that email that I sent to you about what President Biden has done on the chips? We had an example come up, and President Biden has dictated that the majority of the chips are to go to the automotive industry and not our industry. That's why we're seeing this huge shortage of chips. And it became clear to us from the manufacturer when we had a piece of equipment that came in. It didn't come in, it's being made, and they couldn't make it because they didn't have the chips to make it. So they came back to us and said we could make it this way, but you would have to, it was going to actually use more energy. And from the manufacturer, it was stated that at least another year delay because of the chip shortage. I really want you to think this, because we're not giving you smoke here. This is reality, and it's affecting driving my company right now because of this chip shortage. And I would ask you to vote no for this right now until we get out of this. Thanks.
Thanks, Larry. Tim?
Yeah, this is Tim with AGC. You know, Carolyn, Andrea, and Damien have made great points on supply chain. And I haven't heard anything back from proponents that speak to that supply chain problem. If you don't have equipment, you're dead in the water. And so I just want to ask the proponents that when you hear Carolyn, Andrea, and Damien talk about supply chain problems, and you hear them talk about 18 to 20 months out, and you hear Damien talk about you can't do this as a practical matter, what's your response?
So go ahead, Sean, if you want to. You're not required to answer, but you are welcome to.
Sure. So when we look at the supply chain issues, I think there's a lot of uncertainty in what the supply chain is going to look like. And we've also seen that Washington State has proven itself to be able to respond to those issues by suspending regulations when it looks like the supply chain is not going to be able to support the regulations. We saw that with demand responsive water heaters in the last year, and that could happen again. So my response is that since we don't know for sure what is going to happen with the supply chain, I am willing to trust my state's governance to be able to handle these issues as they come, particularly because we have people on this call who I am sure will also be, who have that history of speaking with our government about these issues as they arise, so that we can avoid that problem if it turns out that by the time homes are actually being built to this code, it is still an issue that we are able to address it.
Thanks, Sean. Dwayne.
Well, just wanted to respond to that this is for a code that goes into effect for permits that are applied for starting next summer, 13 months from now. And so the first heat pumps that are going to be going in will be for things that are built in next construction season, so we'll need them in the fall of 23. And then this stays in force for another 3 years. And actually projects often extend beyond that. So this is a long range thing. Like Sean just mentioned, when we do have a specific issue that comes up and reality just bites, then we we can modify as we go on, but I'm expecting some other crisis we haven't even thought of yet to be happening 2 years from now, but this one will, is very likely resolved by then.
Thanks, Dwayne. Carolyn, you're next.
Yes, I just want to respond to some of the responses real quick. Right now we have the flexibility and we've still had to be coming back to ask for changes due to some of the supply chain issues. Our government does have some ability to move, but particularly if the emergency orders go away, that flexibility, that ability to move becomes much slower. It's not that easy to even come back to this group to ask for relief from issues due to supply chain, as we found out. 2024, 6 months after this goes into effect, is when the California requirement will take place. And we don't know what the impact will be. If manufacturing has to double just to meet that, what will it have to do to meet ours? We need to build more affordable housing now. We can have the arguments over what is affordable housing, but we need to build more. We know we need more inventory out there. So we're just asking that you do not mandate this. We feel that the options tables already gives us the ability to sort of put some of this in play. We're seeing it happen. Technology will catch up. We're asking that you don't mandate it right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. We have people who've spoken many, many times with their hands up. I will call on you if your hand's up, but please say something new that's adding to the discussion. Johnny, your hand was up, now it's down.
I don't need to speak, it's fine.
Okay. Larry, go for it.
The thing that bothers me is after last council meeting, how the group came out to them and asked them about giving this pass this through this code cycle, and the response from the council was no. So the people did come out and ask for a stay here for a while, and the council was adamant and said no. And that's what's really bothering to me, because they showed that there was a need, but the council would not allow it. And that's what's really bothering to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. And to add to that, as a council member, and we have several council members here, it was actually unanimous, as I recall. And it was not because the problem was not seen by the council, but it was that the remedy was not the right remedy. And so I think the council is hoping to hear about more potential remedies at the next council meeting. So I think I just wanted to shed some light onto what Larry said about that. Wade, you're up next.
Yeah, as far as supply chain goes, for us right now, the 9.5 HSPF combos aren't available. It's actually at this time, it's forcing us into putting in the 11 HSPF systems, which has resulted in our cost to the builder since 2015 has nearly doubled. So we're almost 2 times the job cost for each home. And we do over 3,000 homes a year. So it's a pretty broad base. On top of that, you've got the industry in the process of changing to a different refrigerant, which is going to cause all the manufacturers to have to rework some of their stuff. And so that will prolong the delays. And then the other thing that I heard is that there's a rationale that this is a good idea because land costs are going up, so people can't afford the houses already. So let's just throw some more dirt on that grave. I don't think is necessarily the right approach. I don't think we should raise the bar even higher than it already is based on land cost and inflation. That's it.
Thanks, Wade. I'm assuming the other hands up are just remaining up right now. So let's do a roll call vote on this one. The motion on the floor is to pass this proposal into the next, to the MV committee and the council for the next public process. So that's the motion, and let's take a roll call vote on it.
Damon,
Aye. Or excuse me, nay.
Mike Fowler,
Yes.
Wade Craig,
No.
Dwayne Johnlin,
Yes.
Dave Balon,
Dave, we can't hear you if you're saying something.
Yes.
Jonathan Jones,
I abstain.
David Reddy,
Yes.
Gary Hickinen,
No.
Andrea Smith,
No.
Irina Rasputnis,
Yes.
Amy Willis,
Yes.
Greg Davenport,
Yes.
Henry Odom,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes, are you back? Luke Howard,
Yes.
Jeanette McHugh,
No.
Krista, did you ask Gavin or John?
I skipped John, I apologize. John?
Yes. Did you record my vote, Krista? Is it
Yes.
Dave Balon?
And Jason Carter, did we ask Jason Carter?
Is Jason here?
I don't know.
I didn't think he was here.
Okay, may not be. Okay,
Can you all hear me?
I can hear you now, Dave.
Oh, did you record my vote before?
Yes.
I have you as voting yes.
Okay, thank you.
Motion carries 10-5 with one abstention.
Okay. We are going to take a break. This is going to be both our bathroom break and our lunch break. So let's be back in 10 minutes at 11:37. All right, and then we'll consider the second thing on our agenda. Thanks. All right. All right, well, we're back from our break. We are going to talk about some carbon emissions factors. Is our next agenda item. Damon, I see you have your hand up.
Just a point of clarification. Is somebody, either Henry or Dave Bailing, going to revise the table 406 prior to our next meeting as a result of that last vote?
Yes, I think there is some correlation that needs to happen, and we can't direct Henry to do that, but some correlation needs to be done. And I don't know, Krista, is that something that you feel like you can reach out to people to help with, or do you think you'll need to revisit that after this?
I would like to see it presented at Friday's meeting if possible.
Okay. Henry, are you on the call and able to talk about whether that's possible or reasonable or not? Okay, Damon, I will ask Henry about that later, okay? And please remind me if I forget.
Okay, thank you.
There, you have your hand up as well. Okay, we're gonna move on to 068. This is Kevin. Kevin was not here earlier. Kevin, are you around?
I don't think he is, but I can speak on this one, Chell. This is Gary.
Okay, please, you have the floor, Gary.
Pretty straightforward. We actually made this proposal during the commercial process. Since the state is now using a projected emissions factor for electricity, we're also proposing a projected emissions factor for natural gas. This particular number assumes about a 10% mix of renewable natural gas in the mix in 2030. So that's just a very straightforward explanation of what this proposal is.
Thanks, Gary.
And if you'll take a motion, I'll move to approve.
You can do that.
Or do you want to have discussion first? That's fine.
No, Gary, as a tag member, you are always free to make motions when you have the floor. So you have a motion. Is there a second for the motion to approve as written?
This is Chris Burrows, second.
Okay.
Sorry, I think Chris is my alternate, so I'm not sure how that works.
Chris,
didn't Lisa make a motion yesterday or last time as an alternate? I didn't think I could either, but then Lisa made an alternate motion last time. And so I was like, oh, I guess I can.
I believe we said that an alternate can still do that. I guess just provisionally, would anybody else want to second this if Chris was unable?
I will second for sake of discussion.
Okay, thank you, Damon. I just would hate to go backwards on something. So, okay, we have a motion, we have a second, and I'm going to call on Liz.
Well, hi folks, Liz Reichart, Department of Commerce. Just had a couple of thoughts to share. I have the other emissions factor proposal in here. So in Washington, there is no legal requirement that gas distribution companies incorporate RNG into their product. And I am unaware of any gas distribution company that has committed to doing so or even developed really specific plans to acquire RNG and implement that mix. So I'm not certain where the 10% is coming from. And just wanted to let folks know that I don't see any evidence in statute to back up such a claim. So therefore, I'm not convinced this is a change we should be making to the table. Thanks.
May I respond?
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
A couple of things. I believe that trying to remember the act of the Clean Buildings Act included requirements for natural gas utilities in Washington to provide access to renewable natural gas. So although that is not a hard requirement for a certain percentage by a certain time, it certainly would imply that if customers want and need access, that utilities will have to provide. I will also say that at least for Northwest Natural, has been very active in securing renewable natural gas, and at this date, I believe, have either contracts or supplies equivalent to about 3% of input. So I believe that a 10% by 2030 projection is reasonable, and frankly, every bit as reasonable as a projection of a 0.44 factor for electricity. So thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I have Dwayne next.
Thanks. As far as I can tell, the renewable natural gas that is produced is a very high value for vehicles. And so, and I think there's a huge demand for vehicle fuel, renewable fuel in California that siphons off a lot. So I think that what renewable gas there is being produced and that will be in the future is much more likely to go into land vehicles, there's some talk of aircraft, ocean going ships. Those are, since those can't really run on heat pumps, that's where they go. So I can't imagine that this very valuable resource will be just put into the mix with the regular pipeline.
Thanks, Dwayne. Larry, you still have your hand up? I don't know if it's a remnant of prior discussion or.
I'm trying to understand where we're at. I kind of lost where we're at.
Okay.
So,
okay, go ahead.
Which are we on? 068, 070, 050?
We're on 068, and Gary made a motion to pass this as written.
Okay.
And it was seconded. So that's the motion on the floor.
Thank you.
Okay, Amy.
Thanks, Jill. Yes, Gary, you're right. Under the Clean Buildings Act in 2019, it did direct gas utilities to do some voluntary programs up to a certain cost cap. So basically, this is like your kind of green direct where you say, hey, I want to have all my gas usage covered by RNG, and what is really, you know, renewable credits that are being perhaps produced from a it could be an in-state RNG production, or it could be out of state. So such as Northwest Natural is using gas from Nebraska. I would love to see more RNG in the pipeline, but I haven't seen quite enough from the gas utilities to statewide to say that a 10% by 2030 is quite yet reasonable. I think we're going to be back here in a few years updating the code again, and if capital investments are showing that that's seeming more likely, I think I'd be more comfortable updating this number then. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. I see no more hands up, so I'm going to suggest that we do a roll call vote on this one. So Krista, do the honors. Once again, the motion, just to make sure everybody's clear on it, is passing 068 as written, which would modify the natural gas carbon emissions factor.
Oh, hang on, my document's acting squirrely again. Okay, Damon Doyle.
Aye.
Mike Fowler.
No.
Wade Craig.
Aye.
Dwayne Johnlin.
No.
Dave Balon.
I'm here.
And your vote?
Dave Balon, we were voting on 068 to pass a modification to the natural gas carbon emissions factor.
I don't know which one was it. No.
Jonathan Jones.
No.
David Reddy.
No.
Gary Hickinen.
Yes.
Andrea Smith.
Yes.
Irina Rasputnis.
No.
Amy Willis.
No.
Greg Davenport.
No.
Henry Odom.
No.
John Lang.
No.
Patrick Hayes. Luke Howard.
No.
Jeanette McHugh.
Yes.
Okay, motion fails 5-11.
Okay, motion fails 5-11. That was, motion was to pass it. Krista, can you remind me, do we move on or do we need a motion to not approve it before we move on?
It would probably be cleaner to do a motion to disapprove it, although there's fairly clear intent that.
Motion to disapprove. This is Dwayne.
Okay.
Second, Mike.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second to disapprove 068, which is modifies the natural gas emissions. Is there further discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote to, this one is to disapprove 068. So a yes vote disapproves it, a no vote keeps it on the table. Go ahead.
Okay, Damon Doyle,
No.
Mike Fowler,
Yes.
Wade Craig,
No.
Dwayne Johnlin,
Yes.
Dave Balon,
Yes.
Jonathan Jones,
Yes.
David Reddy,
Yes.
Gary Hickinen,
No.
Andrea Smith,
No.
Irina Rasputnis,
Yes.
Amy Wheelis,
Yes.
Greg Davenport,
Yes.
Henry Odom,
Yes.
John Lang,
Yes.
Luke Howard,
Yes.
Jeanette McHugh.
No.
Motion carries 11-5.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Please, Dave, go.
We already voted this down. It isn't necessary for us to vote it down twice. It doesn't change the outcome. I think hereafter we should, if we vote something down, we vote it down. If we, as it is, we'll go through these roll calls every time, at least once when we do, if we approve it, and twice if we don't. And that doesn't seem reasonable.
Okay.
It's pretty standard procedure for these kind of boards to get a definitive vote on what the intention was.
Right.
Dwayne, so you're saying we should vote to disapprove if the vote to approve does not pass?
Yeah, we'll just ask Krista to do speed reading.
Okay. Okay, I mean, being clear, I think is important, so.
Boy, but that's pretty clear already.
Yep. Okay, well. Okay, we're gonna go to Liz Reichart with emissions factors, the next emissions factors one, where we reconsider the table. And I guess my understanding is the integrated draft includes 0.44, is that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So I guess, Krista, in your infinite wisdom, is this necessary?
I don't really see a point to it.
Okay.
Unless it gets modified.
We have two other proposals that are trying to modify it, so.
Okay, so why don't, we'll consider this one. It is not a change from the integrated draft. It is a change from the last code cycle. So I guess just to show intent, we'll consider this one. Okay. We've already discussed emission factors a little bit. We could discuss it more if people want. Or someone could make a motion.
I'd like to hear the proponent explain.
Okay, go ahead, Liz.
Thanks, Chell, and recognizing that this is in the integrated draft, but when we checked in with council staff, they said, just to be safe, let's include this as a proposal. So, hi folks, Liz Reichart, Department of Commerce again. This is a very simple proposal that reflects needed changes to the carbon emissions factor for electricity in the residential code in order to be consistent with what we just passed in the commercial code, and also in order to align with statute. It would simply update this figure to more accurately reflect where the state's electricity generation is heading by mandate. So I think everyone here is aware of the Clean Energy Transformation Act, or CETA, establishes 100% clean electricity standard. This update uses a long-run marginal emissions rate for end-use electricity consumed in Washington. And you can read more about the NREL analysis attached to that proposal. This number better reflects the new electric load, the evolution of the grid under CETA, and also the time frame of mechanical systems installed in newly constructed buildings. Those of you involved in the commercial code process may recall we put this forward and it was adopted. That's why it's in the integrated draft. So this would just be consistency across codes. We already do this. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Liz. Dave, you have your hand up?
Yes, I'd like you to, if you can, tell us what we mean by long-term analysis in the NREL work. What was the time horizon?
May I respond to that?
Pardon me?
May I respond to that, Chell?
Sure.
Please, Liz.
Okay, great. So yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about the modeling. This is a really well-analyzed estimate that captures, not only the simple effects of CETA, but takes a really careful, conservative approach to acknowledging our impacts on the shift towards cleaner electrification. So NREL, with this long-run marginal emissions rate, looked at how the system will be built out. And so with growth in future electricity demand, what would the new resources be? That's basically what this reflects. And so it wouldn't be crazy to say that under CETA, we'd have zero emissions because we know Washington operates in a much larger electric grid that extends outside its borders. We know that by us demanding more clean electricity, we may also cause some fossil fuel plants in other states to operate more. And so NREL accounts for that in this analysis. That's why this number isn't zero. It's actually a pretty conservative estimate.
Thanks, Liz. Dave Balon, you have the floor.
No, I'm okay.
Okay. All right. Well, seeing no more hands up, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve, as we see on the screen.
Second.
I'll second the motion. This is Greg.
Okay, we have a motion from Dwayne and a second from Greg. Gary.
Thank you, Chell. So, and I've made these comments before, but this projected 0.44 pounds per kilowatt hour is a result of an analysis done by NREL. It's a modeled analysis, and like most models, even though they are good models, depend upon accurate assumptions. You don't get accurate assumptions, you can get wildly different results. As an example of that, the NREL ran about 10 different scenarios for this particular study. And the results from those 10 different scenarios ranged from a minus 0.2 pounds per kilowatt hour, not exactly sure how you get to a negative number, all the way up to 1.7 pounds per kilowatt hour in the one scenario. I might also point out that the marginal emissions in the Western grid today are about 1.5 pounds per kilowatt hour, and that really has not changed. It's bounced around a little bit, but for the most part has not changed substantially in certainly more than 10 years. So to believe that all of a sudden now we're going to get a precipitous drop down to 0.44 just is not reasonable. So I think this number is not correct. I think it will result in making the wrong decision and not the best decision on how buildings use energy. So I am opposed to this. I'll be voting against it. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Larry.
Yeah, the utilities know what the CO2 content is right now. They're mandated to do this. And when the utilities tell you that this isn't correct, that those are actual facts. And it isn't a modeled thing. This is what's actually happening today. And to take something that's 1/3 of what's really happening today, it isn't right. And the model, there's something wrong with the model, or the one they picked isn't right, because they know what's happening. They have documented evidence of what's happening. And so this isn't right. Thanks.
So Larry, just to be clear, buildings permitted under the code wouldn't be using energy today or tomorrow. They wouldn't be using energy for probably at least a year or a couple of years from now. And
it's not gonna change that dramatically. We'd hope to have a change by 2030, but this data here isn't gonna come true until probably at least 2030 if we're doing good. And what we're doing as utilities is we're playing the shell game. Okay, we're shelling our power like Avista. They're playing the shell game, and so the Rathdrum power grid that normally supplies us isn't going to supply us anymore. That's gas turbine powered. Oh, and by the way, the power that's on Baker Street, that's gas generated, that's not going to, even though it's in the state of Washington, it's not going to power anything in the state of Washington. That electricity is going to be shipped to Idaho. Okay, it's a shell game that's happening here, and right now we're not there. We would love to be there, but we're not there. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Dave Balon.
Yeah, it is true that the utilities know how much carbon's in their supply. It's in fact documented in a public database that's run by the Department of Ecology, and it's about 0.45 right now today. It has varied between about 0.39 and about 0.52 for the last 20 years, and usually it stays in the mid 40s. The reason that is because there's a certain amount of coal, we don't get any more. There's a certain amount of gas, we do get some more, but we get solar and wind to go with it, so it ends up being about the same. Yes, it's true, there's possibilities for especially Avista to cook the books, but Avista's a little utility compared to the rest of the state. 0.44 is a very reasonable number, even if you decided that it was only for the current and near future supply of electricity in Washington. If you decided it was what this is 0.44, and it's a long-term reduction in the Washington utilities, but a subsequent increase in Southwest utilities because of their inability to get Washington cheap hydropower. I strongly support this, and I call the question.
Thanks, Dave. Is there anybody opposed to voting right now? Okay, let's do a roll call vote on this. And to restate the motion is for proposal 070, and that is to pass this as written, which wouldn't actually, so right now in the integrated draft, it's 0.44. And this would just, I guess, suggest that the tag believes that 0.44 is the right number kind of for a second time. So the vote for it is to keep the 0.44 number in the electricity emissions. So go ahead, Krista.
I had a question on the phone.
Who is this?
Too late. Mike Kennedy.
Hey, Mike, go ahead.
In the commercial discussions of this number, I think the state was saying that the Power Council, Northwest Power Planning Council, was in the process of developing and updating their values, but they weren't done yet. And I guess I have the question is, what did their work come up with? I mean, that would be very Northwest specific information, and it seems like that would be a very relevant thing to be considering.
Liz, do you have an answer for that?
No, I do not. I hadn't started at Commerce when we had the commercial discussion, but I can do some digging around, make sure that this aligns with the NREL work.
Thanks, Liz. Gary.
Yeah, maybe to answer Mike's question and
Oh.
Mike,
I'm realizing now that we had to call the question, nobody opposed it. And so
got to call the questions. Absolutely.
So sorry, I
No
forgot
worries.
for a second, but
I understand.
we do need to vote on it.
We can talk about it on my proposal.
Okay, sounds good. All right, Krista.
Damon Doyle,
Yes.
Mike Fowler,
Yes.
Wade Craig,
No.
Dwayne Johnson,
Yes.
Dave Balon,
Yes.
Jonathan Jones,
Jonathan, I don't hear you if you're talking.
I don't see him on the list anymore.
Okay.
Megan Kramer,
Megan, I don't hear you. You're on mute.
I'll abstain. Sorry, I wasn't prepared to vote. I didn't realize. Thank you.
David Reddy,
Yes.
Gary Hickman,
No.
Andrea Smith,
No.
Irina Respetness,
Yes.
Amy Willis,
Yes.
Greg Davenport,
Yes.
Henry Odom,
Yes.
John Lang,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes, Luke Howard,
Yes.
Jeanette McHugh.
No.
Motion carries 11-4 with one abstention.
Okay. Motion passes 11-4 with one abstention. We are on to the next one, which is a Gary Heikkinen proposal 052 on total building performance option 2. I believe we tabled this one last time. And we're going to reconsider it. So Gary, you have the floor, and you can obviously wait until the proposal comes up.
Thank you. So this really is talking about the same electricity factor and maybe an answer to Mike Kennedy's question. I have not seen, I guess, an updated report from the Northwest Power Council. I did use this number, this 0.93 pounds per kilowatt hour, is from the Northwest Power and Conservation Council's report on avoided emissions from their 2018 report. And this number, 0.93 pounds per kilowatt hour, is a projected number based upon their report. And I believe this number is based on their 2026, I believe, yeah, for the year 2026. The number for 2030, as a matter of fact, or 2029 is 0.97, but this is a number for 2026 from the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, just proposing that they are more of a local, well-respected organization. And I would believe that this is a better source to use, a better data source to use for these purposes. So that's all I need to say on that one.
Thanks, Gary. And I just wanted to point out that people who have been talking have mentioned 3 versions of what our carbon factor could be. And Gary, you can correct me if I say this incorrectly, but there's a short run marginal emissions rate, which is the avoided emissions that I think Gary is pointing to from the Northwest Power System, and that is often used in incentives. There is a average emissions rate, which is taking up all the power supplied in a year. What is the emissions rate on average of that? And then what the Commerce proposal is a long run marginal emissions rate, which is looking at policy and how it will change in the future. Is that generally correct, Gary?
I think so. I think that David's quoting of the emissions rate in Washington today are our average emissions, obviously a lot of hydro, but they are not the marginal emissions. The NREL is a long run marginal emissions rate. The Northwest Power Council number here, although they don't call it either a long range or short range marginal, it is an avoided or marginal emissions rate for the Western, the WECC. So it's a West system-wide projection for marginal emission rates in 2026. Certainly takes into account some of the activities going on, but based on a 2018, I don't know if it includes everything that's been considered.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I have Dave.
This is Mike
Go ahead,
Kennedy on
Mike.
the phone.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and I think the important thing is the council work. I mean, you can use the 2030 number. I think they have a 2035 number, and those actually are higher than the numbers Gary is proposing here. And those would be the long range, I mean, marginal efficiency. I don't know what year the NREL work is using, but it's, you know, if you get out more than 20 years, and I think you're, as an average for the life of the building, I think you're starting to get beyond what's reasonable. I think it's important to emphasize that just choosing a low number doesn't save us carbon unless it actually reflects the average. If the average turns out to be higher than this, we will actually be increasing carbon by choosing a low number. We have a strong interest in choosing the real actual average. You have increased carbon if the choice is either side of that. So I think it is important that we get the correct number, not the lowest possible number. So, and I don't know, you know, I think I think it was Luke Howard that told me, and someone else at Commerce said, hey, the council is, redoing these numbers, and this 0.44 is close to what they're coming up with. And I don't know why that suddenly information is not either still available or done or anything else, but that seems to not be the case any longer. So I'd be very interested in seeing what their best work is and if it's been updated. Anyway, all I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Dave Bailon is next.
Yeah, I hate to go into this, but the 0.93 or 0.92 was a Power Council number. It actually was published in the beginning of 2018. It was based on the data collected for the 7th Power Plan, which was published in 2016. The data was collected in 2015. Since 2015, we have the Clean Energy Act. We have the Oregon sort of anti-coal act, and whatever passes for utility policy in California, which is certainly not, which is generally more aggressive than either of us, but also more confusing. In short, 0.93 really does reflect where we were in 2015. Where we are now, it took 2 years from the time they issued the power plan to the time they actually did a full accounting for the carbon. The power plan is just a little over a year old right now, or it's not even quite a year old right now. And so I would expect they'll come up with a number, but it will probably be much lower than 9.3 because of all these other factors, but it's hard to say for sure what it is. Mike's right. It's the average that counts for purposes of buildings, and the average that counts for Washington has been a number right around 0.44 for 20 years. It probably will go down if we manage to get the coal plants shut.
Okay, thanks, Dave.
That's not what I said. I think the average marginal rate is what counts, not the average.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mike's wrong. The average rate is what counts.
No, the average marginal rate, because otherwise we're releasing carbon in Arizona. I mean, it's not just our emissions. Carbon released in Arizona is carbon released into the atmosphere.
So just so everybody knows, I've had extensive conversations with the people at NREL about this, and so I have some knowledge about that. And they do include interactive effects. They include policies in their projections, and they do include that if less power is required in Washington, then more hydro can go to Arizona, for example. Or if more power is required in Washington, we will use potentially power generated in Arizona. So those interactive effects are part of the calculations that they're doing. Liz, go ahead.
Thanks, Chell, and thanks for highlighting those features of the NREL modeling. Just wanted to flag a couple concerns with this proposal that haven't already been said, I think. So this proposal uses a short-run marginal emissions rate from analysis by the Power Council, which I don't think is the appropriate measure for evaluating these long-lived assets that will affect consumption over many years. We use a long-run marginal emissions rate because it's a much more appropriate measure for some of these long-lived assets. And now it's consistent with what we use in the commercial code. It aligns with how California is thinking about this too with their recent energy code update. So just wanted to put a stake in the ground for the value of a long-run marginal emissions rate there. Thanks.
Thanks, Liz. Dwayne.
Well, I believe that it was mentioned that this was based around the 2026 projection, right? And new houses will be coming online and being occupied under this new code between like 24 and 28. And then they will stay in place without significant changes for another couple of generations. So using a number that's based on a projection that's just a few years out is not a sensible way to approach this. Thanks.
Thanks, Dwayne. Poppy.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to confirm that I agree that I think we should use a long-run marginal emissions rate and not the short-run rate that's described in the Power Council report. And I also just wanted to reiterate that that report is based on policy assessments before we've had, particularly in Washington State, the Clean Energy Transformation Act. And I know that Dave mentioned that and mentioned that with a slew of other examples, but that one really is one of the most important points. It is not appropriate to use a number for an emissions rate that does not take into consideration the biggest, most significant electricity decarbonization legislation that we've had in Washington State. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Poppy. Amy.
Thanks, Jill. I agree with the past points that especially Poppy made and Liz about using the long-term marginal emissions rate. But I think Mike's point is well taken, and I would have put this in the chat, but I think he's on the phone. But I just wanted to note, I reached out to the person who led the study that's referenced here in footnote A to see what updates they may have made as part of the most recent power plan. And if I get anything interesting, I will send that to Krista to send around.
Thanks, Amy. Gary.
Yeah, thanks again.
I have the spreadsheets of the council's work that go out to 2041 from the most recent plan done in 2021. And they're out through 2040, they're about 0.6 is about the average emissions rate. And then beyond 2040, it drops down to, probably 0.5 or maybe 0.44. Not even, yeah, probably not quite 0.44. And that's the early coal retirement spreadsheet. They have a lot of different scenarios. So I think I'd love to see a little more work done on this.
Okay. And Mike, was that the long run or short run or other marginal emissions?
I'm sorry, the phone's freaking out.
Was that the short run
anybody hear
marginal
me?
emissions that you're talking about? Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, they have individual years. I mean, they actually have it by quarter.
But is it the marginal emissions?
Starts in 2021. Well, it's marginal emissions.
Okay.
And it starts at, so it depends what you talk about long run average. If your building was built in 2024, it starts out, as Gary said, it's about 0.9 to 1 is about the average, and it carries on and it trails down to about 0.65 by 2030, maybe 0.6, and it stays at that level for the next 10 years, 12 years. So for the next 18 years, it's above 0.6. And then after 18 years, they show a step down in 2039 where it steps down into this 0.5, maybe 0.45 range.
Thanks, Mike.
So
Gary.
I mean, if you averaged all those numbers, you'd get a long run average, and it would be closer to 0.6, probably.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Gary.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that based upon that 2018 report, as Dave said, it was based upon probably information from 2015-16. It showed in 2016, so this is a 2018 report, and so it showed some actual pounds per CO2 kilowatt hours, and in 2016, 1.83 pounds per kilowatt hour, even much higher than the 1.5 that I've been quoting. It showed a quote unquote projection at that point in time of 2021 as 0.91 pounds per kilowatt hour. And we know today that it is still about 1.5 at least in the Western grid. So that projection, even back then, was maybe a little bit too optimistic. So I don't think these projections, 2026, it's 0.93, 2031 is 0.97, that those projections are unreasonable. I think they may still be conservative, but I appreciate Mike doing some homework there and finding out what some of the more recent numbers might be, whether that's a draft report or what. I'd be interested in seeing that too. So thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I'm not recalling if we have a motion on this one or not yet.
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I move we disapprove this proposal.
Okay, we have a motion to disapprove.
Second.
A motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, let's do a roll call vote on this, which is to disapprove 052, which is a carbon emissions modification of electricity factor.
Damon Doyle,
No.
Mike Fowler,
Yes.
Wade Craig,
No.
Dwayne Johnlin,
Yes.
Dave Balon,
Yes.
Jonathan Jones,
Yes.
David Reddy,
Yes.
Gary Hickinen,
No.
Andrea Smith,
No.
Irina Rasputnis,
Yes.
Amy Wheelis,
Yes.
Greg Davenport,
Yes.
Henry Odom,
Yes.
John Lang,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes, Luke Howard,
Yes.
Jeanette McHugh,
No.
motion carries 11-5.
Okay, motion carries 11-5. We are going to move on. We have about a half hour left in our joyous time here today. We have, we're on to 011. Our value competition is Kevin Duell. Kevin is not here. I guess we could move on from there if we wanted to, but
Just a second. I
Kevin
think
is
Kevin was on. Kevin, are you on?
Sorry, double muted. Yes, I'm back.
oh, Kevin, welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you. So this is pretty simple, just a clerical change. If you look at the strikeout and then look at the two sentences prior, I'll just give you a second to do that, where it describes continuous insulation and cavity insulation. It seems to me that the calculation is clearly spelled out that it says continuous insulation alone, or in the previous sentence, cavity insulation alone shall be used to determine. And then the sentence with the strikeout goes on to say, once again, repeats that information by saying, you can only use one or the other, don't mix them up. I'm sure there's a pain point here, but to me, this strikes me as redundant and the code has enough words in it already. That's my argument.
Thanks, Kevin. Anybody want to speak on this or make a motion?
I move to approve.
A motion to approve, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Dave Balon made the motion, Gary seconded. Yeah, are there any further discussion?
By the way, you may never hear that again.
That's right.
That's why I repeated it. Okay. All right, I'm going to risk a voice vote with this. All in favor of the motion, which is to pass proposal 011, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Okay, unanimous. All right, 011 passes. We are on to another Kevin proposal, which is insulation and unconditioned attics. Kevin, you have the floor.
Okay, this was actually born of a discussion during the integrated draft. When Krista gets the language up, I think it'll be clear. There's a footnote that I have to read twice to understand. I'm assuming a builder would have to read it more than twice. It's clear, but it's obscure. And Krista actually, in the description of this change, I thought, put a better description in there than the original, which is copied right there. And I believe what that underlying statement says is precisely the same thing, but in a much clearer language. So there you go.
I move to approve.
Gary, do you want to go for two?
Absolutely. We're on a roll.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there further discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, motion, any opposed, say nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. That's 012. We are on to Lisa. Believe you are not here today, so can't really say anything if you're not here. We had asked Lisa, I think, to come back with some modifications, and she's not here. So let's go back to Kevin. He's on a roll of passing things unanimously. So let's talk about pools and spas for 015.
And really, this is about two words that show up, I believe, 3 times as a phrase in this code, which is where installed, which is my personal pet peeve. I think you've heard my argument before. Either it's installed or it's not. And if it is, the code applies. And if it's not, it doesn't. So I see no reason for this phrase.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, is there a motion? Or does anybody want time to pontificate?
Yeah.
I was going to give Dave and Gary a chance, but I'll move to approve. This is Amy.
Okay. You have a motion?
I'll still second this, Gary.
See it.
All right.
It's almost as good.
So Amy made a motion, Gary seconded it. The motion is to approve 015 as written, striking the word where installed. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, thank you, Kevin. That passes. And we're on to another one, 069, which is also yours. So Kevin, you have the floor.
Roll. This one is not so simple.
No, I don't think this is going to be quite the same.
And this is going to be very familiar, I believe, because it's similar. Oh, wait, this is not the latest version. I submitted a different version a couple weeks back.
Let me see if I can find it. Hang on just a second.
069. Kevin, could you send the revised version to Krista via email just in case it's difficult for her to find it?
I think so, yes. And just a quick summary. The tag has seen this before. It was proposed that these exceptions don't belong here, but really this is a points table set of items. And so that's what the revision would be. It's going to take me a second to find that. You want to table
I've
this
got
for
it,
a minute?
Kevin.
Oh, yeah. And before we get into this discussion, between now and the submittal of the revision, I came across an additional standard that should actually be mentioned in here. And I believe even with the modification to the sibling proposal that was heard, I think, Friday, which I think still included gas heat pumps, if I'm remembering correctly. But so this would still apply. And I'm trying to find that standard. I'm sorry, but it's the same category. If we scroll down to the bottom, or no, you can see right there the Z21.40.2. There's also, I believe it's .3. .2 applies to internal combustion heat pumps. And there's another one that applies to absorption, or actually just gas heat pumps in general. And I believe that should be included in this one and actually the other one. And if I can't find that in the next couple minutes, I'll just get that to Krista in the near term, if that's appropriate.
Yeah, you could just put it in the chat if it's just a standard that could be added, copy pasted into the proposal.
It's actually, okay, here it is, Z21.40.1. So if that went ahead of the .2, that would be an appropriate update. Sorry to throw this at you at the last second, but
that's fine.
It's not that big a change, really.
No, I don't think it is. Okay, Kevin, do you want to introduce this and
Sure. So the purpose of this is to acknowledge gas heat pumps in particular, specifically applied to residential. I believe with the previous discussion, there was probably the note that there aren't units available commercially now to serve a typical single family home. However, a large single family home and certainly multifamily units that are also regulated by this code, for that size of a building, there are units available and have been for decades actually. And in addition, there are units being piloted right now in British Columbia that could serve a single family home. They're being piloted in single family homes. I think 10 at the moment. So they're not commercially available, but they are certified, let's put it that way. And they're expected to be commercially available next year from one manufacturer at least. And you've probably heard that the North American Gas Heat Pump Collaborative is eagerly pursuing the deployment of these units, and that collaborative includes NIA, which is a market transformation expert. And the other element that I think will have to be struck just because of prior proposals, yes, that's what I meant to say. I think 3.8, the first portion is not consistent with adopted proposals. Is that correct? Actually, all of 3.8 appears, since it's based on a 0.91 UEF.
I guess we could pass something that modifies what we've already passed, but ideally for the clarity of the tag, we would decide if we want to strike it or not.
Okay.
In other words, we can reconsider things if we want, but if it's in conflict with something else, we should propose a remedy right now. And striking it is one remedy. I just want to make sure you're aware that some other remedy might be available.
fair enough. And then I believe 3.9 still stands because it's, I think, solely based on gas heat pumps. And I have not done a detailed energy analysis on the points. Those are based on, well, frankly, other related measures that appeared to align with the efficiency gains of this equipment. And I think you've already passed a similar version to this for the water heating, which 3.9 is about combi systems. So
Okay.
I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. And I guess Henry, for his 406 proposal, was assigning number of credits, and I guess I think that's going to be a point of discussion as well as the rest of the content of this. So I'll just open it up. Henry.
Yep, I would say we need to strike 3.8 per the heat pump proposals that were provided and approved. There's a lot of work to be done on R406, and I think I'm going to need a working group to help figure that out. But the basis of R406 is efficiency above federal minimum standards, and if heat pumps of either gas or electric are now required, R406 can only give credits above the prescriptive requirements of the code. So a question to Kevin, is there a federal minimum efficiency for gas-fired heat pumps yet? And what is that? Because that would define the basis of what these credits could be. Otherwise, we can't just double count credits in this table if it's already required in the prescriptive code.
You could.
Kevin, is there a federal minimum efficiency for gas heat pump equipment?
Not exactly, not for this application.
Okay, go ahead, Henry. Did you have more?
Nothing, no solutions right now. I would just say these credit values should be up for debate whether or not this is passed. Yeah, like there's R406 is completely flipped upside down, so it's hard to give firm direction.
Okay, Dwayne, you have the floor.
Thank you. Question, you said that these are certified, but does that mean that they have UL and AHRI listings and certifications complete enough that they would, if that product was offered tomorrow, it could be meet all the codes and be installed?
I believe that's correct because the equipment is being installed in buildings as we speak.
This is as a pilot project, but I mean, yeah.
Yes, as a pilot, but even as a pilot, you can't put in dangerous equipment, I guess I want to say. So I'm not sure which certification. I believe it's CSL.
So
in order to be applied in Canada.
AHRI.
Or CSA rather, excuse me.
AHRI listing and certification does already exist for that specific product?
That I'm not sure about.
That would be amazing if it was. They're backed up about a year.
Yeah, I doubt it's that certification. I believe it's just the electrical safety, like CSA.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dwayne. Dave Balon, you're next.
Yeah. Yeah, these points are almost certainly wrong, but let's leave that out for the moment. What surprises me about this is that Kevin didn't actually put in a discussion or at least a definition of heat pumps with gas backup, which was actually passed as part of Henry's proposal. But the gas company could have taken issue with several of those issues and gotten better points, perhaps. Nevertheless, I don't have any idea where these numbers come from, and frankly, I'm not totally sure how to recalculate them. Even the only number we have right now is a 1.15 efficiency for presumably absorption cycle heat pump of some sort. and I've never actually even seen this rating in the real world, but maybe it's there. I mean, even if this passes, we can't use these points. We have to we're going to have to start over anyway with the heat pump restriction or the heat pump requirements that we passed a little earlier, and that's not a particularly trivial problem. And we will get some gas in that way because of the way that the exceptions are written in that case. If the gas company has something that resembles a base case for an absorption cycle chiller, that would make it possible to actually do something with that. But if it doesn't, I think we basically back to the gas backed up heat pump as the main gas unit that comes through as a result of the various things we've done. I think I oppose this, but I think I oppose it because it's not really a complete proposal, and I don't know how to make it a complete proposal.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I guess a question for kind of both Henry and Kevin, which is, do you think information exists in the world that could get us to the number of points that align with the other 406 proposal that we passed? I guess that's kind of the question, and maybe that was Dave Balon's question as well.
Yeah.
I'll begin. I believe Dave has a great critique, and that is that there should be some absolute numbers in here for efficiency, particularly for 3.9. 3.7 does have that, and that would be simple enough to add those. There perhaps should be a different number for a absorption unit versus an engine driven unit, because those have different efficiency averages. And I agree, the points should be reworked based on the 406 table efforts. And I could propose numbers right now if that's appropriate.
Well, I guess the
numbers for the efficiencies, excuse me.
Yeah, I think the question is, if there are numbers, what are they based on, and is there kind of like a credible source that would put the correct numbers in there that would be proportional to all the other stuff in the R406 table, such that, you know, one point in the R406 is roughly equivalent to another point in the R406 table, and that's why I asked the question of you and Henry: is does the information exist where we could credibly do that?
I mean,
like I said,
again, go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, it'd be good to know if there's a range of units. If someone's going to put in a gas-fired heat pump, is there 3 different models with different efficiency points, or is a gas-fired heat pump have a UEF of 1.15 and that's about all you can get? Because if you need to buy the same unit to meet the prescriptive requirements, then I don't see a spot in it in the table. Whereas electric heat pumps, right, you have HSPF 9, 9.5, 11, you can start giving stepped credit values to it above what the federal minimum is.
Yeah, to that point, absorption units generally are between 1.2 and 1.4. Engine driven are usually 1.4 to 1.6. Depends on the application and the manufacturer. But to answer your question about a minimum to derive from, I'm not sure what you base that on. Do you base that on
Federal standard? That's what we use.
Yes, but
If there's no federal standard, then we pick a number out of our hat.
I don't know. That's my question.
And I think that's a question for everybody. Gary's had his hand up, and Gary, you might have be able to illuminate us on this.
I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to illuminate. I was moving towards maybe making a motion to to maybe accept the basic concept of including these items with the acknowledgement that we need to provide some information on efficiency and then allow Henry to do his work on points, but I don't know if that would be an appropriate motion or not at this point in time.
I mean, Gary, you can make a motion anytime, and I think that's a reasonable motion. It's got some provisions in it, but provisions are I think, fine for a motion. So we have a motion on the floor.
What's the motion?
Well, the motion is basically to, let's see if I can make this clear, approve the items 3.7, 3.9. Was there more than just 3.7 and 3.9? Or was that it?
There's some strikeouts above, I think, or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Acknowledging that work needs to be done on the specific points or credits allowed, and that work be incorporated into the work that Henry will need to be doing on the credits table anyway. So it's basically approving the concept of including those two items in the table.
And Gary, where would these new numbers come from?
Which new numbers? Are you
Well,
talking
we've
about
got
the credits?
efficiency and we've got points. Points I understand, but I can't understand how to do them without the efficiency number.
I think that we can go to the manufacturer's information on 2 or 3 of the manufacturers that we know of and provide that information. If we want to land on something that's more conservative, let's say they give a range of 1.2 to 1.4, and we say, okay, let's just say it needs to be better than 1.2. We base the credits on 1.2, and that's what you get.
Is that your prediction of what the federal standard would be?
I'm not in any way be able to propose my guess would be if there's going to be a standard for this equipment, it's going to be somewhere north of 1. That's probably about the best guess I could make.
I
Okay.
can't imagine that a federal standard would be so low as that.
Okay,
At
we have a
White Rock.
motion. The motion is to
You
pass,
asked me for a guess, so that's what my guess was. Anyway,
the motion
So in
is to
effect, the motion
pass
is
this
to take-
concept with the idea that the numbers need to be run in an energy model with a credible backup. And that's my understanding of the motion that's on the floor. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
There was a second from Patrick. And just so the meeting is scheduled to end at 1 o'clock. That's what it says on the agenda. So we could extend it if we wanted to. That would be another motion, but the meeting will end at 1 per the agenda, unless something changes. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. Is there further discussion on this particular motion?
One tiny thing is that this should not be manufacturer's information. This should be information from a testing agency, a third party of some sort.
Yeah. Which doesn't exist.
Might not.
My hand is raised.
Yeah, I was going to call on Greg first because Greg also has his hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I raised my hand before there was a motion on the table. Let's let this motion play out afterwards. If it doesn't pass, I'm gonna motion that we disapprove.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Kevin.
Yeah, as far as the standard to base the credit number on, I would like to do some research because I know there is a federal standard. I'm just not sure what exactly it applies to, and I want to get that ironed out in keeping with the motion that's in play. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Let's do a roll call vote on this. Oh, I see Larry's hand up. Larry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to talk just a few minutes about this, about the third-party testing like ARI. the manufacturers themselves test these units in their labs. And then their test results are sent to ARI. And then it's not like you send these heat pumps and stuff to ARI and they have this huge lab that goes out and tests all this equipment. It's tested by the manufacturer at their facilities. They're
Not at their facility.
at their facilities. I've been there before, Dave. Okay.
Dave,
And
Larry has the floor, Dave, so you can raise your hand and speak after him, but let's
Okay.
let Larry have the floor.
okay. And like Rude and Lennox, they have their own test facilities. That data is sent to ARI. And then there's a lot of times there's an ARI person that comes out and verifies their results. Okay. But it's not like you go send it to another company. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Dave, did you have something to say?
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right. Let's vote on this. This is the motion is to approve this with some caveats as have been discussed. So Krista, go ahead.
Damon Doyle,
Aye.
Mike Fowler,
No.
Wade Craig,
Yes.
Dwayne Johnlin,
No.
Dave Balon,
No.
Jonathan Jones,
No.
David Reddy,
No.
Gary Hickenen,
Yes.
Andrea Smith,
Yes.
Irina Rasputnis,
No.
Amy Willis,
Yes.
Greg Davenport,
No.
Henry Odom,
Yes.
Gavin Tenold. Oh, sorry, John Lang,
No.
Patrick Hayes,
Yes.
Luke Howard,
No.
Jeanette McHugh,
Yes.
okay, motion fails 9-8.
Okay, we have 3 more minutes. Greg, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to motion to disapprove this proposal.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Is there further discussion? Okay. All right. Let's take a roll call vote. Krista?
Okay, Damon,
No.
Mike Fowler,
Yes.
Wade,
No.
Dwayne,
Yes.
Dave Balon,
Yes.
Jonathan Jones,
Yes.
David Reddy,
Yes.
Gary Hickenen,
No.
Andrea Smith,
No.
Irina Rasputnis,
Yes.
Amy Willis,
Yes.
Greg Davenport,
Yes.
Henry Odom,
Abstain.
John Lang,
Yes.
Patrick Hayes,
No.
Luke Howard,
Yes.
Jeanette McHugh,
No.
motion carries 10-7 with one abstention.
Okay, motion carries 10-1 with one abstention. We have 1 minute left. Damon, I see your hand up.
I move, we adjourn.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. I was about to do that anyway, but I don't know that we need a motion to do that, but we are adjourned. Thank you so much. We will have a marathon session on Friday. We need to cover everything else we haven't covered. We got a lot done today. We have a lot more to do on Friday. So we are adjourned for now. Thank you so much for being here and all of your intelligence and technical expertise. Thanks all. See you on Friday.
Bye.
Thank you.